Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pregame Network Podcast. This is episode 117, episode 117, if you will. Quite
Hey,
apropos.
wow,
Hey, yeah,
that just occurred to me.
yeah.
That's very
Holy
appropriate.
shit. Okay, that's
Wow.
perfect.
Good
Oh,
job,
wow.
Dan.
Okay,
Holy
yeah,
shit.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself for that one, too.
There you go.
It literally hit me as the words were coming out of my mouth. All right, it's going to be a good episode. I just rubbed my hands together. You couldn't
There
see
you
it, though.
go.
All right, so I am your host, Dan, joined as always by my bestest pal, Anthony. Say hi, Anthony.
Hello.
And we are back to talk about more stuff and things in the realm of video games. And strap yourselves in because this is set to be a
Gonna
pretty
be a big
girthy
one.
episode, by
Yeah.
our standards.
Yes.
So with that being said, first, like every other episode, we go over what we've been playing. Anthony, I'm going to hand the mic over to you for this because
Mhm.
anyway, you go first. You go first
Okay.
this week.
Okay. So first things first, I have to get this first thing out of the way because it is something I meant to talk about last week, but it completely glazed over just from the overall experience, Dan. So what I played last week was a game called, and I need to look up the name because I forget it constantly. I keep calling it Cortisol. The game is called Cortisol Theater of Idols. You hear about that at all?
No, I have no idea what that is.
To kind of put into context the caliber of game this is, the only reason I was able to play it is because it was on Game Pass Essential. It's one of those games.
Okay.
The best way I can describe this, and if and when I do a video on it, I'm going to title it much the same. It is Resident Evil 7, but cheap, easy, and Spanish.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
It is a frustrating, weird, and kind of boring thing.
Okay.
So basically, the whole idea is you play as this guy. I forgot his fucking name. I think his name
What
was
is this
Gabriel.
called again? I'm gonna look it up. Oh, no, that's not it.
Cortisol Theater of Idols. I keep calling it Cortisol Theater of Dolls, but that's not correct. Cortisol Theater of Idols. I might have actually called it Dolls when I explained it to you. But basically,
I don't see it on the Xbox store. Go ahead, continue. That's fine.
CRISOL. Just type that in. It should be the only thing that comes up.
Okay. CRISOL. Nope, I'm not seeing it here.
Okay, I guess I hallucinated it, or it's just that forgettable. But anyway, so this game, I think you play as a guy called Gabriel, right? You are sent to an island by a god that your group worships. It's like the sun. The whole theme of this game is you're caught in basically a conflict between a god of the sun and a god of the seas. You
Okay.
show up, you go through the world's most drawn out prologue, and then your very first encounter you get into, you die, your god kind of says that you're kind of pathetic, and then you come back to life with a new power. And that power is basically any weapon you pick up can be transformed and retrofitted to use your blood as bullets. And that's like the main gimmick of this game. The only thing you're really managing is your own health and ways to heal yourself. Basically, there's no ammo pickups. There's nothing like that of any kind. It's if you want to reload your weapons, you need to take away from your health. And I thought that was very interesting for a survival horror gimmick. But the problem is, right out of the gate, you are basically like you already have everything interesting about the game. You're not finding new health pickups. Occasionally, you'll get a health upgrade, but it's like, imagine if you were playing Resident Evil 7, because that is, something you played recently. It's what I compare this to, or Resident Evil Village, but you could just occasionally upgrade your weapons through a vendor, but like the crafting system is really just like, it's just non-existent. You just have one pickup. It's a healing item. That's really it for throughout the entire game.
Seems a little boring.
It basically, that was one of the boring things to me. One of the things that kind of ruined it early is, sure, you find other weapons, sure, you can upgrade your weapons, but it is very scaled down. It's like 1/10 of what Resident Evil Village or Resident Evil 4 has to offer as far as pickups and upgrades and all that kind of thing. So it kind of bummed me out immediately. It also set the tone and stage very, very poorly, because I mentioned that the prologue was drawn out. The very first ledge I had to climb up, Dan, had yellow paint all over it, and I kind of roll my eyes, and I know you rolled your eyes, but there's a reason I'm bringing it up. Dan, I shit you not, every single climbable ledge, climbable ladder, things you can squeeze under, things you can squeeze against, 99% of them had yellow paint on them.
Oh God.
This is such it is such
Really like
a
insulting to your intelligence.
a railroaded linear experience. And because of how boring it is, the first thing that just comes to mind is the fact that there was yellow paint everywhere. And I talk about that with all the RE Engine games, but legitimately, like, it would use other techniques to show me where to go with like good lighting when I'm like, oh my God, that's good. But then everything had yellow paint on it. And like, it got to the point where, like, when I discovered one thing that didn't, I'm just like, was this a mistake? Was there something wrong here? Like, there are some ridiculous hurdles, and this also, I'm trying to tie this into level design because the level design kind of sucks. There is like a storage container that was just open, and I'm just like, oh, perfect, it's open. I can go in there and just grab whatever's in there. That was my thought process, right? So I go to the storage container. In the storage container is a knocked over pallet I need to squeeze under. That pallet had yellow paint on it. I'm like, what do you think I'm going to get lost here? You're already shining a light on the storage container. The door is open. I don't know why you put this pallet in here in the first place, but now there's yellow paint that I got to... Anyway, I may be focusing on the yellow paint, but there really isn't much to talk about with this game. I thought that the blood mechanic was interesting. I thought that it was nice, even though the game doesn't really run well and it's not that much of a looker. I found it nice that it wasn't like dreadfully colorless. It has some really nice looking environments in some cases. It has one of the worst implementations of a stalker mechanic I can think of. Where like
my most hated mechanic.
Yeah, but it's like you can only crouch walk. The second you run, it knows where you are anywhere, but they also want to make it easy for you so you can go into anything that is just slightly lower than its head will protect you from it. It doesn't really reach in there. It has an ability to, but it never did for me. It'll walk up to you, it'll stare you right in the eye and say like, I'll find you again later, and it'll just walk away. And they shoehorn this creature into any open space they could. But yeah, I mean, there's not too much to say about it other than
your head in your hands right now.
Yeah, I just like I sat through this entire fucking thing. I played it. I wanted to give it the best chance that I could because I'm just like, this is very clearly inspired by 7. Like the way that it handles, you know how Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 to a lesser degree are like they're very heavy shooters because it's like that's part of the tension. It's like every movement feels thoughtful, and it's like they copied that, but in a very cheap manner. Right.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I don't have too much else to say. The blood mechanic was neat. I wish there was more to do with the systems. I wish it wasn't borderline retarded with the yellow paint because I cannot stress this enough. It may sound like I'm making a big deal about it. I mean, throughout the entire game, if you could interact with something in a way where you can climb on top of it or slide underneath it, there were like 5 examples where you didn't have yellow paint on it. And there are a lot of these things in the game. Like, it is the most notable thing about the game is they have pushed the boundaries of yellow paint. Like, people make fun of Resident Evil 4, like, of the RE Engine games, because that one kind of overdid it. I bring up Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster because it has one of the most ridiculous things with, like, the whole this way with a yellow arrow. This game really takes the cake with that. But overall, it was just a really disappointing experience. Also, it has terrible voice acting. The main guy was kind of giving it his all. He gets a lot of like side work. I think he's currently the voice of Blanca in Street Fighter. I was like, wow, I don't know what you're doing here. He tries to give it his all, but like then the writing comes and kneecaps him when he tries. The sidekick character that talks to you on the radio, I was fucking stunned. This chick is like one of the first ever YouTube cover artists turn anime voice actresses. I'm just like, you were annoying me when I was in middle school. What the fuck are you doing in this video game yapping at me on this radio? I thought you were done with gigs like this. And I guess that all I have to say about this, way too much yellow paint, really boring kind of, game with not much going on with it, slow pacing, some very awkward stealth segments, plot really goes nowhere. I don't have much to say. This is just one of those games where it's like it's in between boring and bad for me, and that's like at a certain point I run out of things to say. I would not recommend Cortisol Theater of Yellow Paint.
Cortisol.
Yeah,
it's raising your cortisol level. That's for sure.
I've been calling it Cortisol because like that's such an unfortunate naming convention. Anyway, moving on. Not too much else to really talk about. I have 2 major things that I played, but I forgot to mention, obviously, we have our rotation. We've been playing a lot of Helldivers.
Yep.
And we have jumped back in the finals to a
Yes, we
moderate
have.
success, I'd say.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it.
I think overall, like the average has been positive in the
Yeah,
handful of games we played between yesterday and today. But
yeah,
like the finals gets to that point where like their Embark's matchmaking for the finals, especially in the game modes that we play, it will
hmm
always prioritize teams if you're going in as a team. So like
yeah,
you'll get like a full 3, 4, or 5 stack of people in the same clan or whatever, and it's that kind of comes with its own territory of they're definitely talking to each other. They've been playing it for a while, so like that will translate into either a really positive experience because you end up stomping the other team because you're just
hmm
better, or a really negative experience when the opposite happens and they just destroy you. It's usually one or the other. It's almost never in the middle.
hmm
Um,
I get that.
but yeah,
Yeah, so we've dipped a toe back into that. So far, reception has been positive. I don't think we'll be putting
yeah,
it down quite as
I'm
quickly, but
enjoying
we'll
it.
see what happens. I'm enjoying. I didn't, unlike everybody else, when we, well, you guys uninstalled it. I just kept it on there. But when everybody uninstalled it, I kind of just, I was unbothered. I was in my lane, healthfully unbothered. But yeah, so that's back on rotation. I obviously have Marvel Rivals. We've been playing some Helldivers. So the rotation is about the same. Now that we briefly got Game Pass Ultimate again to play another game, which we will be talking about, I decided to just go back and had Death Stranding on my Xbox because I was curious about something. Now that it's been a couple months, I booted it back up just to kind of drive up and down the map to see how much of my shit survived, and it was kind of a nice experience to go across and see that extremely long chunks of road that I had spent the time building, because I mentioned like I loved the like kind of building aspect of that game more than anything else that the game had to offer. So it was kind of cool to see that a lot of my roads had actually survived and players had been using them. So I'd been like, oh, that's nice, and then I uninstalled it. And then now there are 3 games left that I played. One's kind of short, one's kind of long, and one's relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. So another game that I tried, because we very briefly have Game Pass Ultimate again, is I played a game called Denshattack or Denshattack. I don't know how to pronounce it. Have you heard about this?
Never heard of it.
Okay, so basically it's kind of it's like a quirky anime inspired game. It is what people are describing it as. They're describing it as Tony Hawk but with trains. And
Okay.
how I would describe it is it's an on the rails trick and challenge game. Like you're driving down this set course, right? Kind of like a Tony Hawk, but more like the later Tony Hawks where it is very on the rails. Like you only have one path with some branches, but you're always going forward. And the whole point is, you're driving a train, but it's like the logic is thrown out the window, so you're jumping all over the place. You can do tricks while you're in the air and stuff like that, and you basically need to jump between rails, jump through the air, jump over obstacles. Some levels have like time limits, some levels have objectives where it's kind of like a semi-open world. And the main draw of this game is that like all of the budget went to a bunch of fairly well-known composers and artists in the gaming space, with a very particular vibe in like, kind of jazzy, funky J-pop kind of thing. Basically, like they got the guy who does Persona music. They got the guy who did some of the Persona vocals for Persona 3. They got this Nintendo guy who had worked at the company for a long fucking time doing Pokemon music and Splatoon music. They got they got the Western guy who's been doing Sonic music. His name's T. Lopes. He's been doing Sonic music for a while, and he comes in and he does his thing. They got the guy that did Jet Set Radio. That's the whole draw. Is even if you hate the fucking game, you like the soundtrack. It's the kind of stuff that me, my buddy, and also Harrison, like that's the kind of music that we were that we like and that we're into. So it's like I sat there, I got some of my buddies in, and I'm sitting there playing it, and we're rolling our eyes at like the way the game looks and how the game kind of plays. But it's like, how's the music in this level, because when you get down to it, the gameplay is kind of very messy. A lot of the visual effects are kind of like hard to look at, and like the writing and you may be saying, Anthony, it's an anime inspired game where you're playing as a fucking guy in a train doing all these tricks. Why do you give a shit about the writing? I don't want to groan when I'm playing a video game, right? Like, there's a threshold, there's a limit to what I'm putting up with. Like, you know, I've seen and I've played and I've watched some really silly shit that I can get into. This is just not one of them. And I later found out that, like, this is also one of those games that has a suspicious level of government funding, which means I'm willing to bet there are some activists in there, which is why the writing feels and does a certain way. But I didn't pay for it, so I don't give a shit. So that's one game I've been playing. It's okay. I don't know if I'm gonna go back and finish it, because while I do like the music, everything else about it is kind of obnoxious, and I don't know if I'm willing to put up with that. And I'm the guy who would go out there and play a game like this, you know. So, well, we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll have more to report on. Now, Dan, for the actual exciting shit. The last game I played that's not relevant to what we're going to be talking about is, I finally, after talking about it over and over again, after mentioning that I had played it in drips and drabs, I sat down and I played Final Fantasy XVI. Finally.
Okay.
And I am just above whelmed.
Just above whelmed. That's always great.
Yeah, my whole thing
obviously
is,
Final Fantasy has never been my thing, so like I am gonna have almost no input here. But continue.
You know, it's funny that you say that. So a couple of years ago, me, you, and some other people had a handful of conversations about fighting games, right?
Okay.
And I mentioned that fighting games as a genre and all these companies were drastically changing the games and the franchises in them to appeal to people who say fighting games are not my wheelhouse, right? Final Fantasy has basically been doing that same exact thing, trying to net you guys for a long time now. And I know you mean nothing by it. I know you are a man who goes out and he tries different things, and you know, you put your best foot forward. You know, if you were really just that stuck in your ways, you never would have managed to play Resident Evil 7 and 8.
True.
It frustrates me to no end that you just said that, because that you said, you know, Final Fantasy has never been for me, because this is the Final Fantasy they really, really wanted you to play. It's a full-blown action game. You don't have to worry about your party. You don't have to worry about the equipment of your party. You don't have to worry about turn-based. It's very mash-happy, so even if you just tune out sometimes, you're able to just mash through encounters. And other things that I'm going to mention soon, it was very much directed at people like you who have not sworn off it, but have said, like, it's not for you. And there's nothing wrong that classic Final Fantasy isn't for you. I'm more frustrated at the companies, because this is how it always ends. Like, if you try to adapt for someone who's not your audience, you don't automatically and magically gain that audience. What were we gonna say?
Well, part of the reason why I was never into Final Fantasy, number one, like when we were growing up, they were always turn-based combat games, and I never jived with that. It was just never, ever, ever my thing. I always like to be in the action in real time, like making decisions on the fly. Number two, which is another big factor for me, and which is completely subjective as well, I was never like into the art style of like Eastern, just like the Eastern style of how they visually design their games. So that is another big factor for me. I mean, the gameplay will always come first, obviously, but it's not just the fact that like it was a turn-based game. It's also the fact that like I just never jived with the like what do you even call the art style? You know, like, I don't even know how to refer to it.
It's tough, because that's another thing that has kind of changed entry to entry. Like 1 through 6 are obviously pixelated. 7, 8, and 9 all have rather distinct art styles and are also at various levels of adapting to this new 3D technology that it was at the time. So it's like there are some holdovers, but like between the games proper, there's no core unifying graphic style that I could pinpoint for you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was just an amalgamation of a bunch of things that was the reason why I just never was into Final Fantasy. But originally it was because it was turn-based, and I always thought that was boring, even
Mhm.
though I had a stint with like Fire Emblem, but that's whatever.
Mm. So anyway, so Final Fantasy 16. When I hear it spoken about, I hear, aside from the topic we just talked about, where it's like, oh, it's trying to get other people into the franchise, is I always heard a couple things brought up. One, I always hear people say like, oh, it's got the Devil May Cry battle guy in there, so the gameplay is a little bit more action oriented, and that's true. And then the other thing I hear is it's more grounded. It's like Game of Thrones, right? That's something that I've heard a lot. You might have even heard it once or twice.
No, I don't
Okay.
really. I'm not in like that orbit, so I would never hear anything about those games.
That is again another thing that frustrates me greatly, not because of you, but it just goes to show Dan is the salt of the earth guy who's willing to try new things. You did not even reach this man. Anyway, I would say that the Game of Thrones comparisons are apt for multiple reasons. Just in general, the tone and the grounded nature of the story and the universe and how the things look, it's very grounded. But there are actually more than a handful of parallels between the two where like they're a little bit on the nose about it. The main character isn't quite a bastard, but he's spurned by his mother and parts of the world because he was born a certain way. He's got a runt-like dog that grows into a fierce animal companion. His father is a nobleman who warns verbatim that something is coming during his first appearance, and he eventually dies.
Not Winter?
Not Winter, something about war. I can't even remember, but I was just like, holy shit, he said the thing, just different. And then he dies in a very similar way. There is a betrayal during and after a celebratory gathering where an entire lordship is brought to its knees, and there is a large side character of dubious mental status that assists with his raw strength.
So you're just going like beat for beat.
Not beat
the
for
Game
beat.
of Thrones story.
It doesn't do either of them justice, but there are like small nods where I'm just like, I thought people were just saying this to get people on board, like with the storytelling. I didn't realize that like they were going to take a few things here and there. But anyway. The game is very heavy into regional politics. It spends a ton of screen time explaining those politics in a way that seems like we're going to see a dense period of turmoil pass. You know, it kind of jumps between them the same way that a Game of Thrones television show would jump between the different parties. You know, we happen to be playing as one of the parties, but it always tries to, you know, keep us abreast by showing these lengthy meetings of just politics and things going on in the world, you know. But at the end of the day, the main character is kind of outside of that. He spends most of the game trying to emancipate a underclass of people that have certain attunements and are branded, and they're kind of used borderline as, I wouldn't say slave labor, although that does happen. I mean, like, it's more indentured servitude in a lot of cases, right? And that's like his, like, he goes from being very passive into the story to focusing on that to focusing on a world-ending threat. But the game throughout all of this constantly just brings us back to the politics that at a certain point I got tired of, not because I wasn't interested, but because I had no effect on them. I was just being shown what's going on in the world and then saying, all right, go back to your business. And I'm just like, that's not how like I should be interacting. There should be like it very rarely was a situation where like I was affecting the politics that they were showing me, and if I was, it was only because I was brute forcing them because there is a world-ending threat that I have to deal with, right? It's just like at a certain point it feels less like I'm seeing multiple important parts of the world and plot, and more that the story I'm directly involved in feels like it has nothing to do with the lengthy cutscenes of political intrigue, and by the end game it actually feels like it's getting in the way of the actual story. So, I mean, I like the characters. That's a good thing. You know, I like this version of Sid. I like the main character, Clive. I like his supporting cast, even though we don't really get to see too much of them. Story-wise, plot-wise, it's like, okay, but you kind of squandered a lot with me. Now, the gameplay, I mentioned before, you can get by very mash happy. It is Devil May Cry Light. That's just the way it is. There is you start with in Devil May Cry you have sword and gun. In this you have sword and magic blast. And then over time Clive's whole deal is that he can attune himself with the world, like not gods, but like there are entities in a realm above that certain characters can attune to. It's like you know how Final Fantasy has summons? In this game, people are able to take on the power of the summons, and it basically gives each country like their own kind of power behind them, and that's a big part of it. And as you go through and beat them, Clive is able to attune to multiple of them, and each one comes with their own handful of skills that you can juggle and equip to yourself and whatnot. And some of the core skills are things straight out of Devil May Cry, like a little thing that drags enemies to you or allows you to, pull them down for set pieces and stuff like that. And I gotta say, much like the story, I love how the game plays. There are bits in there that are interesting to me, but they never fucking go into. It's too easy. There is a handful of times where I'm just oh hell yeah, there's a bunch of enemies around me, and then I just wipe them the fuck out because I'm experienced with action games, and this is just a very easy action game at the end of the day. And I stopped dicking around with my equipment at a certain point because the equipment is just there to please people like me, I guess. I could just have the default equipment and make the game slightly harder for me and more interesting for me, and I probably would have been happier because the equipment's bullshit. I don't have to manage my party because apparently the party management was just it's too much for the group they're trying to net, only plays the one character. You're supposed to manage your dog companion, but at a certain point, that just felt weird because it's assigned to the D-pad. So I equipped. There's another funny thing. They just dump a bunch of assistance items on you, where you have one that automatically charges this, one that automatically charges that, one that automatically parries for you. Because all these Final Fantasy games, they want them to be as frictionless as possible for new players like you to come in and say I like this, I will buy next one, right? But I don't want to rant and ramble too much.
When you try to broaden your scope like that to attract different types of players, you end up hurting what made the original formula so good to begin with. And then people like me probably wouldn't even play it anyway for one reason or another. And then you're doing more harm to the brand at the end of the day.
And that's pretty much what happens here. I'm not going to say Final Fantasy XVI is a terrible game, because it isn't. It falls short of what it has to offer. There's a little interesting thing. The way I described it to some people is it felt like I never left the tutorial area. It was just that easy and small in scope that I just felt like I never went anywhere. I've seen people argue online, it's this is a great, phenomenal action game, and it shows off all the flashy stuff, and there are some cool set pieces, there are some cool moves. I think that the game's focus of these summon creatures being major set pieces at the ends of bosses, that's really cool. I think the music is good. It's done by the same guy that does Final Fantasy XIV. I think the game does a lot of good. It's just it never had a chance of netting you guys. It also never had a chance. This was definitely designed with players of 14 in mind, because the whole thing feels like a single player MMO in a bad way, where cutscenes drag, people are doing default animations and cutscenes, the pacing is abhorrent. It's a misfire. Final Fantasy XVI is a misfire. It appeals to none of the groups that they tried to. It doesn't appeal to me as a longtime Final Fantasy player because none of the core values, things like managing your party and growing your group, it's a mess. And I don't want to sit here and ramble about it for 20 minutes. I kind of hit all the broad strokes, I would think. You kind of get how I feel about it. It's just, after all the bits and pieces I played it in, all the the bluster, all the nice things that are in the game, it falls short. And the only other thing I have to say is, I know a couple of weeks ago we talked about the Arc System Works guy, Daisuke Ishiwatari. There was an interview where he said oh, you can't do the same thing over and over for too long, otherwise you'll never be able to do anything else again. And I laughed because that's where ArcSys is right now. These Final Fantasy XIV guys are also firmly in that camp, because there are so many MMO-like things in Final Fantasy XVI that just cripple the experience. The questing structure, the pacing between quests, the pacing between cutscenes. Very messy. Not terrible, not even necessarily bad, but very messy game, Final Fantasy XVI. I'd have to say more about it on the future in a video I do or something, but that's that. Now, Dan, that was the longest of the things I have to say. I know we have another big thing coming up, but the last game I played, I was thinking about the topics we were going to hit today, mixed with the topic I want to cover in my own video at some point as we get closer to the end of summer. Okay. I ended up sitting down to play Silent Hill 2.
Okay.
Not the original. Not the enhanced fan mod, not the remake. Dan, I played the Silent Hill HD collection version of Silent Hill 2. Specifically, I played the PlayStation 3 version. This is, if you don't know, this is the second worst way to experience Silent Hill 2. The worst overall being the Xbox 360 version, because that version did not get any of the patches that the PlayStation 3 version did. The HD collection of Silent Hill 2, if you are not aware, it was meant as kind of like this cash grab, put the series back on its feet after a couple of bad Western entries. But the problem is, it was made by the same Western teams that were making the bad Western Silent Hill games. They based it off of the source, an incomplete version of the source code. It was all on beta code, and it was handled by a guy who wanted to write a new script for the game in a very disrespectful manner. And basically what this version of Silent Hill 2 attests to, Dan, is it takes a masterpiece, it shows it lessens everything about it: the voice acting, the music, the effects, the textures, how the game handles, the sounds. It is a lesser version of a masterpiece that at its time caused a great rift between people who claim to love Silent Hill more than you do. The you being people like me, like the Silent Hill faithful, and people like me, the Silent Hill faithful. The people that would say, like, the original game exists, it's good like this, I'm not going to buy a reheated bad version just for it. And then you would be immediately accosted by a million people who claim to love Silent Hill and would buy anything with a Silent Hill name on it. And there will be more in this conversation later, but that's what I've been playing lately.
Jesus. Okay.
Yeah.
32 minutes in.
I tried to shrink it down as much as possible as I was going.
All right. Well, with that out of the way, good God.
Yeah.
I will keep mine a lot shorter. What have I been playing this week? I finally beat Doom: The Dark Ages on my Nightmare difficulty run. And I started Doom 2016 like right after. I wasn't intending on playing through the Doom trilogy in chronological order, but Revelations came out. I played through that, and then I just thought to myself, I would really want to experience the Dark Ages again. So I did a Nightmare run, and then you know what? This technically takes place before Doom 2016, and I haven't played Doom 2016 in quite a few years. So I booted up Doom 2016, and I started a Nightmare playthrough on that game. And I mean, I definitely have thoughts on like the franchise overall, but like right now, I'm just gonna say what I've been playing. So beat the Dark Ages on Nightmare, started Doom 2016. Like you said, we've been playing the finals in Helldivers. I've been playing a little bit more Killing Floor 3 as well, just to level up my Gunslinger class. And it's pretty apparent that Tripwire made the Gunslinger perk in such a way that kind of makes every other perk in the game obsolete. They really power crept it. Like, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it's definitely better. Like, you can make things work ways that they should not work with the Gunslinger class. So there's some of that, and I still stand by my opinion that the game is fun. The game, I'm enjoying it. It just needs to get rid of the rest of its jank, optimize the product better, and have more content. And so far, according to the new roadmap that they put out like a day or two ago, that seems to be what they're doing. There's like a bunch of balance passes planned and quality of life optimizations and blah, blah, blah. So we will see how that shakes out. I played a little bit of Space Marine 2. I just kind of had the itch. And then Battlefield 6 as well. That's just been like a mainstay for me for the past like month or two. But circling back to Doom, just the trilogy, I do plan on playing Eternal after I finish Doom 2016. But I think that the entire Doom trilogy, at least like the remakes or the reboots, they are probably in my, oh God, I would say top 15, maybe like 12 best first-person shooters that I've ever played.
Interesting.
They just, because like, especially now that I'm going through them again, This is my second playthrough of the Dark Ages, probably my third or fourth of Doom 2016, and then once I get to Eternal, that'll I think be my third overall. So I've played these games like a fair amount, and so couple things. Number one, I think that Doom 2016 nailed the overall atmosphere and like it's really just atmosphere. I don't know what, there's no other word to describe it. It nailed it so perfectly. It really does put the other two games to shame, in my opinion. Like they really went for a more horror, horror feel as opposed to Eternal and the Dark Ages.
Yeah, I will say, just, and I'm going to let you take this and run with it, obviously, my only complaints about 2016 are in comparison to its beta period, where like the atmosphere you're describing was like dialed up to 11 in the beta footage, like the harsh darkness and the orange and the hellish reds and stuff like that. It was really cool in some of the beta footage. But the only other thing I have to say is, like, while I'm not necessarily with you on Eternal and the Dark Ages, I fucking loved Doom 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I would love to get into this more actually. Obviously not for this episode, but I would love to hear why you aren't as crazy about Eternal and the Dark Ages, because I think they are phenomenal games in their own rights. But Doom 2016 really does carry the trilogy on its shoulders in terms of like the first steps of what they set out to do with the Doom IP. It just did it so well, and I think that the way that you physically rip apart demons with your bare hands in 2016 is so much more satisfying than like the kicks or the quick melee animations in the Dark Ages. And that was always a complaint of mine when I played through the Dark Ages, is that I really did not like what they did with the glory kill system. I think it's like it fits in the confines of like you trying to move as fast as possible and bounce from enemy to enemy, but it really takes away from the feeling about you being the slayer, and you know you're the only thing that the demons fear. That's probably one of the few detractors that I have for the Dark Ages. I'm only like 8 hours into Doom 2016, but I played through the first couple levels. I just got back from Hell to the Mars facility, and I think that they handled Hell like visually way better in Doom 2016 than they have in Eternal and the Dark Ages. I might change my tune because I haven't played Eternal again yet, but definitely better than the Dark Ages. So yeah, Doom 2016, Eternal, and Dark Ages, they're just such fun games, and they make you feel like a fucking monster in the best ways. And so I have less to say about Eternal because I haven't gotten to it yet, but the Dark Ages Revelations is the very best that any of the three games have ever been, like full stop.
Interesting. That's high praise.
At the very least, as far as gameplay goes, like the fact that you can switch on the fly between the shield and the spear is literally game changing. It just, and I know I said this last week or 2 weeks ago, once you really get the hang of it and start to, no pun intended, chain different moves and attacks together, it becomes just a breakneck speed of destruction and murder, and it's fucking awesome. But again, Doom 2016 really, really nailed the environment. Like it is just so perfect for the universe of Doom. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I've been playing. The last thing that I've been playing, have been playing together, is Halo Campaign Evolved. And boy, oh boy, do we have thoughts on this.
Yeah.
So
you can take the lead on this, because you've been like in our news and topics chat. You've been like, I think you've mentioned Halo 3 separate times between it getting panned and like your overall reactions to it. So I obviously have a lot to say too, but go ahead and take the lead on this.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot to say about this new remake, Campaign Evolved. Number one biggest thing, obviously, is the fact that it's running in Unreal Engine 5, right? They didn't do 6 yet. It's Unreal 5.
It's Unreal 5, yes.
Okay. And that is the worst thing about the game. It just doesn't quite feel like Halo. It's hard to like really put your finger on one thing in particular, but I think in the case of Campaign Evolved, it really is a situation of death by a thousand cuts. Like there
Yeah.
isn't one thing that would ruin the experience by itself. It's the fact that there's so many little things that they either overlooked or neglected or just basically slapped in the face. And it's impossible to ignore at that point. And I think it's worth mentioning. And I mean, once you upload the gameplay footage, it'll
Yeah.
probably make more sense to anybody out there that's listening. But
Uh-huh.
Anthony and I recently played through the first handful of missions in the Halo Anniversary Edition in the Master Chief Collection. So like the original Halo game, at least the first couple missions, we didn't quite make it up to the Flood, at least in the Anniversary playthrough. The the game itself is like very fresh in our minds.
Yeah.
I was playing through it using all the new additions with like the engine upgrades and whatnot. I know you were primarily doing the original like Blam engine. So I think between the two of us, we have a really good idea of what they've changed, neglected, or just left out entirely on purpose. So I mean, I could tell you right off the bat, like just gut reaction without going into anything hyper specific. This is just a complete misfire for me. And
Yeah.
I'm a big Halo fan. I would think it's safe to say that I'm a bigger Halo fan than you are.
Yeah.
Not like trying to compare, but just factually.
Yeah.
But it's just there are so many little things that we were both like, oh, like why is this here? Like, ew, stop, no.
Yeah.
And it just added up over the course of like a handful of levels.
Yeah, it's I mean to follow up on what you said about like the swap to the Unreal Engine, that really puts a damper on everything, because it's one thing to talk about the handful of things that both of us notice, back and forth, like with all the little small intricacies and also major changes to things like weapons or certain voice lines, certain characters. But
oh, by the way, on the topic of weapons, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say what you think I'm going to say. This will save it for later. Nothing quite sounds right. Nothing.
Yeah, that's
quite sounds the way it should.
What I was going to get at is, before any specific changes, is the change in engine basically guarantees, like, it drenches everything in this feeling of wrongness. Now, when they swapped over to Unreal 5, I think the intention was, internally, they're just like, we have constant turnover with our employees. Like, basically, Halo 4, 5, and Infinite were basically all made by completely different teams with a few creative follow-throughs, and now I would imagine campaign involved is the same exact way. Like, that would be hard enough, but like, now it's like, okay, we have the engine internally that like everybody should just know. So I think their intent was it's going to be visually impressive, and there's going to be less issues because we're finally on the same page with the industry standard as far as what people just jump to for like middleware and open source, or not open source, but like stuff that's just used in the industry, right? And it has like the opposite effect. I think I said to you multiple times, and I'm sure other people online have said it felt like I was playing one of those bro hire me like demo recreations of like, oh, play this game in Unity or play this game in Unreal as like a fan project, because the swap to this new engine and the people working on it just caring less, I guess, or being contract workers, has led to something that just, it is more likely for something to feel off than to feel right, just from the ground up.
What did I tell you before we even got into the playthrough? Based off of like the stuff that we've both seen leading up to us actually playing the game, I'm not. These aren't exact words, but it's the general gist. It felt like there was absolutely zero reverence for the original source material.
Yeah, that's a big thing, and that's an issue we might talk about later as like on an industry level, but it definitely applies here. I mean, it's not a bold statement to say that 343 seemingly does not care about Halo. I think there have been multiple instances within the development of each of the 343 onward Halo games where like you have key developers and key leads basically say that, if not verbatim, they allude to the fact that Halo is something that it almost feels like they're begrudgingly working on it, which is insane to me because 343, now Halo Studios, the weight of that brand is so strong, they up until this point have basically avoided any kind of culpability as far as firings and layoffs. Like, most of their turnover is voluntary or the result of them or the result of Microsoft hiring contract workers. Like, it is very
Speaks
rare.
volumes in itself.
Yeah, it is very rare for 343 or Halo to have mass layoffs like what we just saw with Xbox recently. They were like the studio that managed to dodge the bullets on this one, and it doesn't show. Like, it doesn't reflect in the results. And you kind of hit the nail on the head again, where it's just like there's a lack of reverence there, and it's something that we've known about for a while, and it again shows in the results.
Between all the different things, like on the topic of lack of reverence, which just fucking blows my mind. So on the topic of Halo overall, when I watched the Halo TV show on Paramount, I literally got maybe 15 minutes into the first episode, and Chief fired I think it was the assault rifle. It may have been the BR, but I think it was the assault rifle. It just sounded like generic automatic weapon here. Like that's It did not sound like the assault rifle. Or actually, no, I think it was the BR. It just didn't sound the way that it should sound. And it's such an iconic audio clip across all of video games that how to get that wrong, it really just like says a lot for who you have working on it.
Yeah. On the topic of sounds, like you're talking about the TV show, obviously, and the TV show is a disaster, a nightmare in itself. But looking at the game that we just played with Campaign Evolved, sounds is a good way to put it, is a good thing to talk about, because I think I said to you during it, I'm just like, you can fake a lot of things. You can
fake the audio.
You can't fake the audio. Like I made that because we talked about it, it's like, oh, the environments kind of look nice, even if they look wrong for Halo, but the sounds constantly had some kind of issue. From a base level, the sounds they like kind of picked and just like randomly, some guns will sound like they did in the original, and others will just have completely new sounds. Some characters, they're using the same voice takes or have the same voice actors. Other ones, they had to get completely new characters. Some of them, that's outside their control, but the point stands, it's uneven. Effects, like distance effects, soundstage effects. I had a particular interesting effect where Johnson's talking to us over the radio, but if you get out of the radio range and into the close range of hearing him speak, or vice versa, it'll like cut off harsh or abruptly, or will like the effect won't play the right way. It's just there's a lot
of misfires.
Yeah, a lot of misfires, and that's just
a lot of mistakes.
The sound.
It seems like negligent almost.
It's a mixture of negligence and, once again, what you said, the lack of reverence.
Yeah. Yeah, like just all the UNSC weapons by themselves have such a distinct sound when you shoot them. Like, how do you get that wrong? Like, the one gun that felt and sounded the best, in my opinion, was the Magnum. And
the Magnum's of the UNSC weapons. The Magnum's the winner. Of the Covenant weapons, I think the plasma rifle and the plasma pistol sounded right. I think the plasma pistol overall.
The pistol and the rifle both sounded right.
They're the guns with like the least issues, but they still have issues to a certain degree. Overall, I mean, we're gonna end up going all over the place with this, but like a lot of key factors of this game were just you said misfire, I say bungling. It is what did I say about the Gears Reloaded remake, where I said it's kind of like a warmed over version of Gears 1
right
again.
Yeah
This is like beyond that, because it's like with Gears, you went from Gears 1 to Gears Ultimate, and Gears Ultimate had like, it's not as grimy as it used to be, and that's kind of like part of the charm or whatever, but they tried as hard as they could, I guess. And then Gears Reloaded comes out, and it's like a little bit more colorful, it's a little bit more friendly, the gore isn't as visceral, it's not as dark or grimy, and it's losing some of that sheen. With Halo, you went from Combat Evolved to Anniversary Edition, which was kind of like iffy. There's a lot of issues with the color grading, but like a lot of the designs were still in place. You could jump between the two and kind of note like they're trying, like there's something here that they're trying to do. With Campaign Evolved, it is, I mean, I said it, I'll always compare it when I'm thinking of bad game. It is like Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, where like there's liberties taken in the wrong areas. The game is just, it's meant to be the original game, but easier, regardless of any individual gameplay changes we can talk about. The game is just way easier. They added new functions and features so that newer players can kind of brute force or rush through the game and have limited issues with it. It's just, I don't know. It's
not it. It's not it.
Yeah,
it's not Halo.
It's not it.
It's not it. It's not it.
Yeah.
It's not Halo. So something else that like drove me up a fucking wall was the fact that I had to set my key bindings 3 different times. I had to set my key bindings 3 different times, even though the game told me that it saved them every single time. And then when I turned the game off and went back to it, nope, everything was wiped. On top of that, you couldn't change the fucking resolution.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it wouldn't let me. I could either do borderless full screen or not, and then if I unchecked the borderless full screen box, then I could change the resolution to whatever I wanted. But then I'm playing within like a window as if it was any other window on my desktop, and so I'm playing on PC as usual, and you were playing on the Xbox Series X. That's an important distinction.
Yes.
So for PC performance, god fucking awful. There is like to not have key binding save that's baseline. That is just standard. And I had to set mine 3 different times. I think I killed you once because I hit the wrong button and like it didn't mean to throw a grenade, and I did.
Some kind of weird chain reaction because you can't directly kill me. There's no friendly fire in the game.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's another thing. There's no friendly fire. Like, what is that shit?
So you were talking about your performance issues on the PC with like the resolution. You were getting some ghosting, which means there's some kind of resolution sampling issue going on there. On my end, I would occasionally get harsh like drops in frame rate just at random. It's not, I wouldn't say like the game is buggy on my end as far as performance goes because it ran pretty stable, but occasionally you would just get those hitches. My main thing is like the load times for connecting to a game are a little ridiculous. The menu functionality sometimes has these weird like borderline like amateur Unity issues where like if I choose to leave your game, I have to do a couple extra steps to leave it. It'll kick me as if I'm disconnected. It'll tell me I'm disconnected, but the main menu is in the background functional, and I need to mash B a few times to get to the main menu, despite that it's on there. But the main thing for me that really held me up a couple times, Dan, occasionally the cutscenes just won't play for me. Don't know what that's about. So like the subtitles will function, but it'll just show me the first frame of the cutscene. It'll fade into that first frame. I'll get to hear the cutscene. The subtitles will pop up and it'll fade out. That happened to me 3 times so far.
That's crazy.
And, I don't fucking get it. And
it's not even like you were streaming it. That's an MP4 file somewhere in the game files that's just playing.
I have no fucking idea. But we are rambling quite a bit, so we should probably just say
let's get back on track.
What we did. So we played Halo Campaign Evolved. We decided to lead with the prequel missions. The new the advertised as go and experience a couple of missions with Master Chief and Johnson before the events of Halo. And I said by the end of it, I said, I don't know why they didn't say it's the adventures of Master Chief, Johnson, and this new character Williams for a light hour-and-a-half romp of fun where Master Chief gets Girl Boss to a handful of times before she rides off to the sunset and makes a noble sacrifice, thus justifying her existence in shitting over Chief in just about every scene she's in.
Literally every scene she's in, she had to shit on Chief in some way.
Yeah, this mystery meat woman kept looking down, and if you go online, then they'll raise a finger and say like, "Oh, you can't bitch about this because it's an issue of culture apparently." I don't know. And then other nerds.
If it was a dude and he was talking to Chief in the same way, I would be saying the same fucking thing.
Yeah,
okay? Character was written poorly, performed poorly, was ugly to look at, and served literally no purpose other than to blow up a ship, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. The point is you have this story where you're talking down to this guy, which is unprecedented because one thing that sticks out to me in Halo 3 are the handful of scenes where like Marines encounter Chief for the first time. Comically, I remember there's like a group of Marines sitting there. One of them has been blinded. He has like an injury over his face, and like they're just like, "Oh my god, it's the Chief." He's like, "Are you being serious right now? Where is he?" Like I'm just like they always treated like it was
They treated Chief the
borderline.
same way that the other humans treated the Slayer in Doom.
It's like
It-
almost like they're encountering a god, like a
yeah.
mythical like deity almost, because of the legend around him and the power that he
Well,
exudes.
in Halo 1 through 3, like Chief was the only Spartan that
Yeah.
you knew of.
Exactly.
And the Spartans were these, like you said, borderline demigods that could basically do anything and were morally incorruptible. And
Yeah.
it was just, and everyone treated them as well, treated Chief as such. Like, man of very few words, always does the right thing, gets the job done, doesn't take no for an answer, blah blah blah. And he was always treated that way by just the regular Marines or other UNSC forces, until Halo 4, when they started to introduce other Spartans, and like the novelty of it was kind of taken away. But that's neither here nor there right now. But I guess Williams just thought that she was better than Chief, so had to one up him or tell him what to do or say a snide remark in one way or another, and it was just like
Yeah.
it was just completely out of place and disrespectful to the original property at large.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it just, oh god. So all right, the prequel the prequel missions. We have to deal with fucking Williams, so that's something. The playable spaces.
Before we get to that, I just gotta say one thing. You said "man, a few words." Not in these prequel
Good
missions.
point.
Chief
Excellent
is
point.
very chatty.
Fucking chatterbox. Yeah.
He talks quite a bit,
and his banter back and forth with Johnson is just out of place.
it seems a little much.
Yeah.
Much. Like I appreciate
He was
being able
never
to spend more
written
time
like
with
that.
this. Yeah, he was. I imagine this quiet, larger than life figure, and I don't care that like he's slightly younger here. I know Johnson makes a comment like he's just like, oh, they're all kids to me, like he jokes about that or whatever, but it's just, I don't know. Anyway, continue. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as far as the prequel missions go, there's only 4 of them, and you get through them pretty quickly, thank God. But it's so clear that they were designed by anybody else beyond the people who actually created the first game. Were they brand new to Halo 1, or were they like deleted content that never saw the light of day?
They're brand new. They are completely brand new.
All right, and it shows because the play spaces, like the combat arenas that you fight the Covenant in,
Way
are
too big.
comically large. Like they're huge. Not only are they huge, but like there's this very strange color difference. So like anybody who's played Halo, especially Halo 1, knows that you go up into the Truth and Reconciliation and everything is purple, and everything's got like this soft sheen to it. Like it's kind of shiny, yeah, but it's not as shiny as Unreal Engine 5, that's for fucking sure. And that's a whole different thing altogether.
Yeah.
But everything is purple, and that's like the Covenant color. In these prequel missions, everything is purple, but you go from one room to the very next room, and it switches from purple to white and gold, just like out of nowhere with no explanation. It's very jarring because instead of everything being like a dark purple, you walk into the room and it's white and gold. And it's very God, what's the word?
Jarring.
Yeah, it's jarring. You walk, you're like, whoa, like where am I?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a Covenant ship, and it's just a simple change such as color. It just, I don't know, man. Wasn't good.
Yeah. So my whole thing with you talked a little about the levels. The first things I noticed is that as you said, the levels were way too big for what they were supposed to be. Halo arenas typically have a scale that's appropriate to their purpose. Like I think that regardless of my opinions on which Halo games I like, which games I hate, I would say that most, if not all, of the levels in Halo 1, 2, and 3 are very deliberately designed. And that may sound obvious, but what I mean to say is, like, when you're in a smaller level, when you're in a claustrophobic area, it's for, tight-paced action. When a larger scale level happens, it's because you're probably going to get vehicles or you're going to be traversing for a little bit, right? In these campaign missions, the levels just felt large for the sake of it. And the design differences that you were noting, it really just felt like this was almost like a free-for-all with the people who were designing these levels with no real rhyme or reason or like
no cohesive vision at all.
Yeah, it's it's like we need to do this, we need to sell it, we have this crappy little store we gotta play, and then there's no real rhyme or reason. And it really shows, because something we noted pretty early on into these campaign missions is like, sure, there were a handful of areas where it was traditional Halo, where it was like you walk up to the enemies and there's an encounter laid out for you. You know, there were a handful of that weren't too offensive, but there were more than a handful of situations where it was get to a spot, stand there, and then every like 30 seconds after an encounter, they would send another wave at you single file from one or two
Oh my God, it was
locations.
so boring.
The battle pacing was abysmal in the...
We kept on... What did you say when we were playing? Like, every time you ran up to me, I already like ran through all the enemies that the game threw at me, and then we had to find the other area and run across the room.
There were a handful of times that between the battle pacing and the arena, these larger than necessary arenas, where you would go one way, I would go another. You would happen to be on the side of the room where they're sending the enemies at you, but because the game is so much easier than Halo 1 proper, and the remake overall is an easier version of Halo 1, by the time I acknowledged you were in combat and saw you in combat and got to you, the encounter would be over already, and we'd be back to waiting for... It felt like minutes at a time. It's probably no longer than 45 seconds, but that's still way too long. And that happens way too often during each of the... like, you said 4 missions, it's really 3 and then like an ending mission. In those 3 missions where you're on foot or in a vehicle, like it was poorly designed and poorly paced. And that goes beyond things like the story. I just mean like me and my buddy having a good time or trying to have a good time with this new Halo. And, you know, something that carries throughout the entire game, not just these prequel missions, is something you mentioned, something I mentioned, way too fucking easy. You know, it's
so
when go ahead.
It was way too easy. However, when you inevitably upload the footage that we played through yesterday and the day before, I'm sure people will see that we were dying like left and right.
Yes.
In our defense, there was something going on with the grenade damage.
Yes. So there's two things. There are 2 things to highlight as far as things that actually make this easy, that make this difficult, I guess. Because basically, when you're playing Halo in general, like 1 through 3, it's like you're constantly on your feet, you're constantly shooting at things, picking up weapons, and that kind of remains here. But you need to play smarter in like the actual Halos. In this one, you kind of just charge forward until you've charged forward just a little bit too much and your health goes down. And there are 2 situations where you are more likely to die than in any of the other Halos that come before it. One is from explosions. The reason this is, and I haven't done the science on this, maybe somebody else has done this better, but it's something that both of us noticed. It appears that the damage radius on these explosions goes beyond the visual effect, or at least is deceptive in a way that there's really no feedback. You know, it's just like, oh, you're a little too close to that grenade, even though it doesn't look like the explosion should have killed you, you're dying now, you know, and that applies to grenades, rockets, exploding vehicles, everything. That's one way to die very, very quickly. The other thing is long-range sniper fire doesn't appear to have any effect on it anymore. So like I'm sitting there behind cover, like you ran off ahead. I'm going to recover my health. I'm going to hide behind this rock. And, you know, I actually kind of like this part of this particular level is like we're walking across a bridge. There's like a perch all the way to the left where people are coming out and shooting at us. I'm like, oh, that's a fun little encounter. But the problem is a lot of them are snipers. I didn't notice them at first. I died for no reason. I thought I was running into an insta-death glitch, which I hear is, you know, prevalent in the Halo game. So it took me a while to realize I'm getting hit by sniper fire, but there's no trailer effect. And that lack of trailer of effect also applied when I picked up a sniper weapon, you know? So like, that's one of those small things that, like, you know, I talked about, like, oh, there's a lack of polish throughout. You said death of 1,000 cuts. That's one of those things right there, rearing its ugly head, you know?
Yeah. God, I felt very cheated a lot of the times when I
Yes.
had a death, because
Yes.
like I shouldn't have died, and then that just like kind of messed up the whole flow of the encounter,
Uh-huh.
and then I had to wait for you to go and get away from an enemy or get out of combat or whatever. So the combat itself, like it just it doesn't feel that great. And then okay, so while we're on the topic of the combat, the fucking assault rifle, man, holy shit.
Oh, yes.
You don't need to use any other gun. You don't
Yeah.
need to use any other weapon. It's got no
This.
damage fall off. The
Yeah.
reticle doesn't bloom out, so like it just shoots in a straight line,
Yes.
basically with unlimited rate. I was taking out banshees with it. That should not happen.
Yeah, we talked about this and we basically came to the conclusion it basically felt like they ported the Halo Infinite assault rifle into Halo 1, and that just
But
breaks
even the
fucking
Halo
everything.
Infinite assault rifle, like if you sustain fire for long enough, your cone of accuracy would expand to the point where you weren't going to hit anything.
Yeah,
Not the case in this game.
yeah,
You could
yeah.
just lay on the trigger. I would take the assault rifle any chance I got because it was just clearly the best option for any scenario.
Uh-huh.
And that breaks the design philosophy of Halo because
Yeah.
you're supposed to run out of ammo because you can't hit as many things with the assault rifle as you can
Yes.
with like the BR or something. So when if there's plenty of ammo, there's no reason to ever take the gun off, and then it breaks the immersion or it breaks the design philosophy of Halo itself because you're never picking up any Covenant weapons, which is clearly what the original intention was when Halo 1, when Halo Combat Evolved first came out. And that was part of the whole charm of the game was you have to pick up the Covenant weapons and use them to survive.
Yeah.
And like I was ranting and raving about this like 3 or 4 different times during our sessions because the assault rifle was just too fucking good. It was too good.
Yeah. And it,
Oh
it
my God.
basically, as a result, so I mentioned why it is that they do that, and it's the same as a handful of other things. It's the same reason why sprinting is in the game and slightly better than it was in Infinite. It's the same reason why there's regenerative health instead of health packs and everything. It's all designed to make the game very easy for people who are just their minds are glazed over, or it's they're trying to get somebody to play this for the first time, similar to when I was talking about Final Fantasy before. They want people to they wanted this to be a good hopping on point, and what that equates to is just like you never have to think, you never have to do anything, you just charge forward with the first weapon they give you in most scenarios. There are some times where they mix it up and give you different weapons because that's just Halo, but what this essentially does is it gives you a weapon that's good at just about every range. From the default, it basically invalidates the need for the SMG or the BR, outside of you just enjoying how it feels. Between the nerfs to other weapons, if aside from like me and you, we tried to experiment with a lot of the different weapons. I, as a player, and this will go to other people who are just playing this for the first time or like never gave a shit about Halo and still don't give a shit about Halo, I could not imagine a world where like anybody picks up the energy rifle, the BR, or the SMG when the AR in this game is just as good as it is. It invalidates the need for those other weapons. And because it's the base weapon, you end up with it a lot. You have tons of ammo for it. There's very few times when you don't have that.
Yep. I don't know, man. Like I said, it breaks the whole design philosophy of Halo being Halo. There's no reason to pick up anything as long as you have the ammo.
Yeah.
Okay, we went over the audio, the overall gameplay, the weapons, the level design.
Most of the prologue mission stuff. The one thing I just to kind of cap off before we talk about finalized thoughts about the game is at the end of the prologue mission, there's like this really awkward space vehicle segment where there's very limited freedom. It's imagine a space dogfighting mission, but with those same combat pacing mission issues we mentioned before, where it's just like you kill a couple enemies, then you're just kind of floating there in space waiting for more enemies to show up. There's some awkward dialogue thrown in there. It opens strong with like a weird strafing run kind of thing. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, and like it's always fun to fly vehicles around, but it's padding for time, these missions.
Yeah, it just gets really boring. I think they probably went for like that one mission in Reach where you're flying one of the UNSC fighters trying to defend.
I know what they were going for. It's just inferior in every way, and it's
just hitting me now. That's probably what the inspiration was.
It was just a weak ending to an already weak set of missions.
yeah, it just wasn't good. But Anthony, what are your thoughts overall on Halo Campaign Evolved?
Well, we obviously haven't played through all of it yet. Um, we gotten up to we've hit all the major things I was curious about. Like I was really curious to see the flood section.
Oh, that's something we forgot to talk about. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was very curious to see the flood as well,
yeah,
which was the last thing that we played last night before going our separate ways. So,
yeah,
well, let's go through the flood really quick. Let's not spend like 10 minutes on this or anything.
yeah.
But you go first.
So basically, like a lot of what we said already about the game and how it handles and how it looks and how it sounds applies to every mission that we've encountered so far to some degree. Like certain things don't feel right, certain things don't, look right. The gameplay isn't any different between the prologue missions and the main campaign, and all the visual issues that we talked about where it's just like it just looks like Unreal, default Unreal. So I was curious when it got to some of the more unique missions, like the mission with the flood, how they were going to handle this. And I've got to say, outside of one spark of excitement, I was very disappointed with how the flood missions were handled, because basically, like, it had this very gloomy, very dark lighting. It for a while there, it seemed like it was leaning into the horror aspect, and I love it when games that aren't horror games lean into horror elements for like singular missions or different elements. And whenever the flood shows up in Halo, it turns into a horror mission, at least for their first mission in whatever game you happen to be playing, right?
Yeah.
So we get in there, and it's like the lighting starts off really good, and then the lighting gets too bright. And I was like, okay, well, that kind of sucks. And then you go a bit deeper and deeper, and you trigger the flood, and you are treated to one of the most egregious breakings of the show don't tell rule, where like Chief finds surveillance footage from this dead Marine, and instead of like scanning relevant parts or doing like Resident Evil 1 kind of thing where you just see brief snippets of a guy getting killed within like the camera footage, Chief watches a conversation in the dropship, then decides to fast forward, shows them talking in front of the entrance for a lengthy period of time, then decides to fast forward, then shows a lengthy period of discussion within it, and then they open the door and the flood comes out. So they squandered one of the coolest potentials of just like slower build up with like
it
the
was an easy
darkness
slam
and
dunk.
the blood and a found footage kind of thing. And then when the flood do hit, and it's essentially, the flood of these like zombie like creatures and parasites and stuff like that. There was one moment when we were leaving that first room, Dan, I was looking down a hallway and I saw one of the flood infected elites standing there, and I'm just like, you guys fucking nailed it. But it was just an opportune encounter by me, because nothing else felt like that the entire time. Everything was too well lit. The enemies were way too easy to kill. I could tell that the flood themselves were less tenacious, so they were just easier overall. And by the time like half the time you spend killing the flood, half of it is just you running back the way you came, in a very, frictionless manner. And then the second half is you rendezvous with a bunch of, constructs and Marines, and they just kind of wipe everything. I was standing around at some point. Like that's how
I remember
unchallenging
that.
it was.
Yeah, you
It
just
was
stood there at
brutal.
the gate, like, and I was
Yeah.
killing everything because even we were playing co-op, there was no reason to have more than one person firing at one time.
Yeah.
As far as I go, I'm fine with the overall like visual design of the flood. It's kind of hard to fuck them up. The I really I agree with the majority of things that you said. I really wish they would have leaned into the horror element of it a little bit more, and they just didn't. Everything was very well lit
Yeah.
when it really shouldn't have been. Something that caught my attention almost immediately was like the little ones, like the spore things. I don't know what they're called off the top of my head, but the little flood that like will latch on to like a human and infect them. They tend to like roam around in packs. There's like at least a dozen of them that are just like that'll come at you at one time. And I remember in the original, if you shot one and blew it up, because they have like this very small explosion radius, the explosion radius would have triggered like a chain reaction. It would have blown up the entire mob. That is not the case in this game. Like you have to dump like at least half a mag into one of these little spore mobs for it to kill them all. And it just didn't seem right to me. Like there was less of a pop than than there was in Campaign Evolved. The lighting kind of ruined it too, because it just wasn't that scary, and it's supposed to be like this very scary moment in the Halo universe. Because when they were marketing the game originally, like they didn't tell you about the flood. That was a complete surprise, and it was such an awesome like subversion of what the game was going to be. Like that's the whole purpose of the Halo rings, to wipe out all life in the galaxy. That way the flood can't basically consume everything. And when we were standing at that gate and those constructs were like lasing everything down, and it was basically just me taking out wave after wave of a flood, you were essentially just standing there because there was no reason for you to do anything. There wasn't. I wish they would have overwhelmed you with enemies, and they just didn't. It was such an easy win. Because the flood, that's the reason why they have the name the flood, because there's no end to them. They overwhelm you, they infect you, and you become one of them. That's what the flood is. They exist to consume.
Yes.
They could have easily have had like 10 times or 5 times the amount of units on screen to give you even if they were just as easy to kill as they are currently, throw an army at us. Like, there was no sense of tension whatsoever, and like that was such a big misstep. Like the flood are so cool, and they could have done so much with it, and they just didn't, and it sucks. So overall, my opinion on the flood, I like the way that they look visually. I like the like the growths on the architecture that looked fine to me, but the way that they played and the way that they went down were just not good. I really wish they would have overwhelmed us with flood units on screen, just to at least, at the very least, give you that like hopeless feeling that there's no making it out of here and you have to fight through the flood to get to safety, and that just wasn't it. It wasn't there. And then, like you said, they just didn't do enough with them. And my biggest complaint are, well, 2 biggest complaints really. The fact that they weren't an overwhelming force, and they were just not scary enough. So just another misfire. So with that being said, what did
go
ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say the same thing you were going to say.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So with all that being said, what were your overall impressions of Halo Campaign Evolved, including the fact that we have not finished the main campaign yet?
So overall, my opinions are that I think it's a fine looking game. That's like the only nice thing I can really say about it, because it's got Unreal Engine 5 default stuff going on with it, and it's designed to look good. I don't think as a remake of Halo, I don't think it looks the way it should. I don't think it sounds the way it should. It is made to be easy to play and brute force. It's really meant for people who want to shut their mind off and not necessarily experience Halo the way it was meant to be experienced the first time around. I think that a lot of just about every edition, if not all of the editions I've seen so far, have been for the negative. That being changes in voice delivery, that being new cutscenes that expand on certain things. Because there are a handful of small scenes where like there's just exposition dumps or explaining things we didn't previously see before, but we didn't need. They break that show don't tell rules so many fucking times. I just think I've said a lot about games like Dead Rising when they get remastered, and it feels like I'm repeating myself here, but it really just feels like a warmed over version of something that was liked before, but with lacking of any reverence that got it to be as popular and revered as it was in the first place, handled by people who arguably don't like it or don't care about it, turned out for a quick buck and a potential new audience. And so far, I don't think anything that's remaining in the game is going to change my mind on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But at the end of the day, the same thing I said about Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, I can't completely hate it as just a game in front of me, because it is just a lesser version of an existing game. And to all the people out there, because there are people out there, and we might talk about them a bit later, where like they say like, oh, you don't have to take advantage of any of the new easier things in the game, just play it that way. Like, I'm having the most fun when I don't use shit like sprinting or aiming down the sights or anything like that, and I'm just on cruise control with what I know about Halo in the past, you know? So I'm getting something out of it, but there's better versions of this game in existence. Ones that have more merit when it comes to artistry and development integrity and just overall skilled developers who were good at their craft.
Yeah. Halo Campaign Evolved misses the mark almost entirely for me. The whole lack of reverence thing is really the greatest sin, in my opinion, here. They, like you said, they either didn't care or actively didn't like the original Halo IP to the point where they changed so much stuff or added so much stuff or neglected or omitted whatever. It just doesn't feel like Halo to me. I think in a universe in which Halo never existed and this game came out, it would be fine because Halo could still be very good on like the major story beats alone if you know nothing about it. But like the way they designed the combat or tweaked it, I should say, did such a disservice to the original game and the way that it made you feel as a player with the power fantasy. Like that, the assault rifle, man. It just once I figured out it was good at pretty much everything, I didn't put it down. There was no reason to. It made the game trivial, and it's a shame. It really is a shame.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Halo needed another remake because there's nothing wrong with Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition to begin with, but it just. Unreal just wasn't a good choice, and it's so obvious that the developers didn't know enough of what they were doing in the engine itself. I don't want to talk in circles. I guess the whole point is that I am a diehard Halo fan. I have been since I played the original game. Less so of a fan of 4, 5, and Infinite. I like the gameplay a lot, but that's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah.
But Halo 1, 2, and 3 are like in my top games of all time. Like they're fucking masterpieces, especially if you zoom out in a macro view, look at it as a trilogy. And Halo Combat Evolved like changed so many things in the gaming landscape, and for it to be handled this way is really discouraging. Like obviously we knew before that 343, and by extension Halo Studios just like wasn't up to this kind of a task. Like now I know beyond the shadow of a doubt they should not be handling Halo.
Yeah.
And I'm usually a lot more forgiving on these things than you are, but like this is just so in my face, I can't ignore it.
Yeah, this is to kind of finalize our opinions before we move on to some facts and some other stories because we do have other things to get to. I think I said something like when the change to Unreal was announced.
Also, Cortana's whole attitude, like fuck that, get out of here.
Yeah. See, that it's funny that you mentioned that. It's like that's like we can't possibly dissect every small thing that's like wrong with this and there's a lot of it, and that's why I tried to mention as many times as possible is like different inflections and voice replacements, just all kinds of wrong. There's a lot of small polished things that you will notice the second that you play it. If you give a shit about games as more than just like shut your brain off, hold the sprint button and run through the fucking game, or if you've played Halo in the past, there's a lot of like nitpicks, but there's also just general polish lacking under the hood with things that would surprise you, like simple things as simple as how bullet holes interact with the environments and how the environments interact. A lot of that is a lot of it is just technically done better in the original because sure, it's older tech. Sure, there's not as many polygons or whatever, but it's handled by people who gave a shit, and it really should. The difference here really does show. There's we talked about our impressions and how much we've played, but this really could be a 2-hour rattling off list all on its own. Yeah. There's that many things and stuff like that.
The last thing that I'll say is my final gripe, and then we'll move on. The shotgun pump animation, the limp dick shotgun pump animation is so pitifully miserable.
It is
I hated using it.
The shotgun is an okay shotgun. It pales in comparison to the Halo shotguns.
So bad.
But anyway. So all that stuff aside, where does that leave Halo? Well, first of all, there's a handful of things that we didn't really touch on because it didn't really affect us. First and foremost, you mentioned you played on the PC. I played on the Xbox. Halo is apparently, it runs best on the PlayStation 5 Pro. That it just
Which
puts
is just
a terrible taste in my mouth.
fucking ironic.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
All versions of Halo had a couple errors with logging in and playing it, because despite the fact that this is a remake of a campaign, there was apparently a lot of login issues. It also had this weird you need a Sony account and a Microsoft account if you're playing on the PlayStation. You had to link different ways, even if you just wanted to play co-op. A lot of weird stuff. And where did this leave Halo? This is currently the lowest rated mainline Halo game. I think it's floating around an 80% on aggregate scores for consoles, and then I think PC is closer to like 75 or something like that.
Okay.
Most people have noted a lot of the issues, if not more, of the things that we brought up. Most people are acknowledging it. Outside of the guys that just consume whatever's in front of them, there seems to be a raking over the coals going on right now. Most people it turned into a whole kerfuffle when Williams showed up, because now you have the people who say like, oh, well, you just hate it because of culture, and you have other people saying like, oh, ugly woman bother me, and it just turns into something stupid. There's most people are commenting that it was not worth putting on multi-platform because nobody on the PlayStation apparently gave a shit. It apparently had a very weak launch on PlayStation. I think less than 1% of all active PlayStations actually booted this fucking thing up and played it, or even played it past 2 hours. So it's just a nightmare, and it really amounted to nothing. It really just shows that 343 is still not a capable steward, even now under Halo Studio. I could have told you this. I was skeptical from the moment they announced they were going to Unreal Engine. All of my fears were pretty much confirmed between... Yeah. It's like, oh, they're going to Unreal. Look at this amazing announcement. And I said, they're only doing that because they literally would not be able to put games out otherwise. They need to rely on, this kind of industry middleware. I also pointed out that... what did I say? I said, I looked at the people that were hiring. The studio head was some kind of, DEI nut job person that was not hiring based on merit, all that kind of stuff. And what was even accomplished with this?
Yeah,
just a degradation of the brand and the Xbox.
To the Halo brand than anything else.
Yeah. And that's hard to do after 343 games,
Yikes. Oh, God. All right. Well, that's Halo wrapped up. We still have plenty of other shit to get to. So, all right. An update now. We don't have a writing question this week, do we?
We do not.
Okay. All right. So our update for this week comes from none other than Sony. They finally broke their silence.
Yes,
after
they did.
Telling the world that they are killing physical media.
Yes.
Anthony, what was this update? What did they say?
Okay, so this was during a Q&A portion of Sony's earnings call that was going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And an analyst came up and asked about, oh, you're going to end disc products. I think you made a comprehensive decision, blah, blah, blah. And the CFO, Lin Tao, said, thank you for the question. PlayStation 5 ending disc production... blah blah blah. Let's see what was exactly said. On this point, we announced that January 2028 onwards, we would no longer be manufacturing game discs. 1.5 years ahead. We made this announcement at this time. There are various reasons we made this decision. The biggest being that the digitalization of contents overall has been progressing. That's the big factor. It's not just for PlayStation, but all kinds of contents. Digitalization is progressing. When we think about the future, we put a lot of thought and time. We cautiously considered this. We came to the conclusion we're going to cautiously move this forward. To this decision, we have received various opinions. People have strong views. We understand that the community has put forth these views to us. Games are loved by many people. A bunch of corporate speak. But the bottom line is they said that they considered all this beforehand and they're going to, quote unquote, cautiously move forward. And then they later commented saying, well, we'll probably still sell boxes at like GameStop or whatever. So they finally broke silence. It was in the...
Basically what everyone was expecting, I would say. There was no way they were going to reverse it. They're still not going to reverse it. I mean, they essentially doubled down on it. And then wouldn't you know it, shortly after, was it before or after they issued this statement that both PSN and Xbox had major service outages for like 20 hours or something like that, and nobody, or the vast majority of players couldn't access their digital libraries.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Which really just goes to show, and I'm glad that we're talking about this again, because I wanted to bring up something anecdotal. A buddy of mine, and you know this person, I'm not going to name names. He said something about how he just wishes that everyone would just like stop with the crusade about bringing back physical media, and I kind of got into it with him too, and we got into a little bit of a heated argument because like he's all about the convenience factor of it, and which is fine, like you're allowed to have that opinion, but like I don't think he connects the dots of the fact that like your library could just go away at any given moment and you have absolutely zero recourse. And like he wouldn't see that point, at least to an extent, and like kind of dismissed it as like, oh, that's never going to happen type of thing, where it's happened, it's been happening, it just happened again like 2 days ago. This is a problem. This is in my opinion the industry's biggest problem right now. It's
definitely a huge problem right now. Yeah,
like it's the fact that if I buy something, I should be able to play it today, tomorrow, 15 years from now, in the middle of the night, whatever the fuck the case may be. Like I own that thing. I should be able to use it whenever I damn well please. And it's just like the way that the industry is right now, that is just a fantasy. You buy anything, even on disc, you still have to phone home and connect to whatever servers you're trying to connect to. And if they're down, then sorry, you can't play the game. Furthermore, do you know the reason why Microsoft had their outage? Do you know why that happened?
I'm not entirely certain why that outage happened, but when it
go
ahead.
Apparently there was a licensing server or a licensing service that Microsoft uses that lives outside of the Microsoft like environment. So that went down, and by itself, like it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the fact that all of the Microsoft associated games need to essentially check in with this licensing server or licensing service brought down the entire thing. So something that does not reside within Microsoft's purview, they have to basically reach out to a third-party vendor. That went down, bringing down the entire Xbox service, essentially. No one can play their games because they couldn't get authenticated when they wanted to play. Like, that's a gigantic problem. And we are just barreling towards this cliff of an entirely digital future with absolutely no contingency plan of what happens if, like, I don't know, man, what if the server building or whatever the case is gets hit by a natural disaster, right? Like, what then? You know, like, is everything you own just go down the shitter? Like, we need a solution to this.
Yeah, so I can sympathize with the people who like that extra convenience of not having to get up.
Right, of course.
And, I can sympathize that. Like, the argument here isn't down with digital, it's there needs to always be a physical option. That's like the key thing here. We've already drifted way too far away from digital, which this Xbox outage highlighted. And obviously it's been going on for a while, but obviously a lot of the discs that you get don't actually have the content. You put it in and it downloads it, and sure, it's a better licensing key than just a digital mark on your account that says that you have it. But it's what's the best way to put this? It's physical rights ownership over games is in a very bad spot. That is not people saying fuck digital and fuck people who like digital. The digital as an option, as a convenience, or like, I think I mentioned it once. It's just like, oh, if I like a game and I want it, I buy the physical copy. If I really, really like it later when it's cheaper, maybe I'll buy it again when it's $5 digitally.
Yeah.
So that way
I've
I can always
have it.
So many
times.
Yeah, like that's how it works. That's how these guys should be getting their kickback. It's a healthy industry fosters that full price for the physical, and then maybe a digital purchase down the line that you really, really enjoy. But to the whole thing of like people not quite getting it, the reason, and it's almost insidious, a lot of this licensing stuff is a far off problem. And what I mean by that is not like, hey, we shouldn't be concerned about it because it's so far in the future. It's the fact that like this has been set up for a long time. It's only now with this scare going on, people are going back to their PlayStation 3 and realizing, oh, I didn't redeem this in time, or oh, I haven't logged on in a long enough time, or oh, just time has passed and this licensing deal's ended, so now I don't have access to this game anymore because I bought it digitally. I think that when it comes to people who just say like, oh, it'll never happen, oh, it's not, it's like they either weren't invested at a certain level, or they aren't invested now, or they just don't care. There are people out there who like just have the spare money, or just like kind of like blindly buying into
the
things.
ironic part about this individual that I was having this debate with is that so just like very, very recently, they were playing a game that is a game that's from like the 90s, right? One of their favorite games of all time. What happens if that old ass license, for whatever reason, like gets plucked out of existence and you just have no access to that content anymore? Like that's the thing that was angering me in the moment, was the fact that like they were saying this, that, and the other thing, and yet their favorite game is something that is that old, where it, one bad pen stroke and he could not have it anymore. Which was like preposterous to me.
So here's the thing: when I think just kind of approach this almost like a hypothetical, when I think of a game from the 90s that you might be playing on a modern platform, right? You are either like, when I think about games from the 90s, I think of like, oh, a lot of the PlayStation classics, right? Let's say somebody bought a PlayStation classic. So let's just say like Final Fantasy. Yeah, some of the PlayStation was like Final Fantasy VII. We'll use as a good example. If you're playing Final Fantasy VII, one of the earliest ways it was available digitally is through the PlayStation 3 store. You know what's going away next year? The PlayStation 3 store. You know what's going to happen at a certain point after the PlayStation 3 store goes away? They will get you somehow where you can no longer download whatever you purchased a long time ago. Now, for some people, and it's scummy that they rely on this, and it reflects poorly on the consumer, is they rely on the fact that it's just like, you know how like me, we've talked about your collection quite a bit, but we haven't really talked about mine. I don't sell anything. Every single video game I've ever owned that hasn't been broken or destroyed in some way, with the exception of Red Faction Guerrilla, I still own in somewhere. When's the last time I went into my closet?
Is that that's kind of ironic, right? With Red Faction? Because the whole game is about destroying shit.
Well, but here's the funny is, I remember it because I just don't sell games. I don't see the value in it. It's just not me. I like collecting. I have that sentimental attachment, even to the worst of games. It's like I bought it. That's part of my gaming history. That's something I could always go back if I felt like, oh, I remember playing this. Maybe I'll give it another shot, or I want to do a video on it or something. And I could just go. I could get up. I could pluck it, and it's there, right? Platform owners see that, and they basically want to be able to pluck the games out of your collection or closet that you're not playing. They will use any excuse possible to make it so that you cannot access that anymore. It's like, oh, well, you haven't played it in a while, so did you ever really own it in the first place? Just buy it again. It's like, there was a recent update. What is it? Like, if you don't log into your PlayStation account in 3 years, you like lose everything or something.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I think
that shouldn't be legal.
Yeah, I really don't know at this point what more can be said when we don't have like a direct topic in front of us to talk about. But like the end goal of this, the end statement should be like, it's not like we don't want to. This isn't like an industrial revolution like protest where we're like destroying machinery or anything. It's like, if you want to buy digital, that's fine. Having the digital marketplace, that convenience, that's also fine. But the whole point is you can't just kill physical. And it's not even applied evenly, because as we discussed last week, other mediums are reveling in the fact that like there are physical options available. The fact that, like, again, and I'm going to bring this up because it's ridiculous, a different part of Sony as a company was advertising vinyl record players at the same time all of this is going on. So it's just
brought that up last week, I think.
Yeah, it is. It came up last week. It is literally I cannot see a good reason for someone to like say, oh, it's not a big deal, or oh, it's not something worth fighting against, because it's like, it is one thing to not be in that market. It's another to passively support that market going away. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember the last time I purchased a CD. If they threatened to say like we're gonna get rid of CD music forever, I wouldn't go up to a CD enthusiast and go like, well, fuck you, I just torrent all my music anyway. Like what does that mean? And if the CD guy came up to me, he's like, I like to own my music, I like to have it, and I'll be like, Godspeed, man. Go get that CD. Like, I don't understand. Like, there is, and I'm not saying this about like the person you brought up as an example, but there are so many people out there that like either place the blame on something completely unrelated or otherwise try to justify what Sony is doing. And it is the stupidest thing I can possibly imagine, because at the end of the day, this will affect you if they ever get the firmest control and grip over digital, you are going to suffer for it. At least if you go legitimate. It is entirely possible that there are some people just like, oh, it gives a fuck about physical, I just torrent all my games anyway. That's like a special kind of like asinity. It's like, yeah, I can play my game from the 90s because I can just, it's easy for me to go online and download an ISO and I can just play it. I'm just like, I guess, but does that mean you should kill physical games, the secondhand market, and all that? Should you cripple a part of the industry because you are not inconvenienced? It's just weird. It's something that extends beyond just this one topic, but also things like Grand Theft Auto going up in price, or like remakes being made that are just not for the fans, and all these other topics we talk about. There is just a group of people or a class of people out there that like, they pretend they have no opinion on it, or they ride the middle, or they are just not related to it, but they will always punch down on the side opposite the corporations, and I have no fucking idea where this consumer mindset comes from. It's wild to me, and it's something that we've talked about before, and we'll definitely talk about more in the future. But yeah, so I guess Sony has basically, I wouldn't say they've doubled down. I do think it's interesting that they said they're cautiously moving forward. I think that should give, you know, people another kind of second wind to keep pushing back against this. It needs to be done in more of a way that it's not, you can't just like say like, I'm not going to play Sony games for a month. It's like, no, you need to stop buying from Sony if you want them to feel this in any way, shape, or form. And I hope it's something that Sony feels in the short term, because I do believe in the long term there will be a notable consumer shift, even if they are able to buffer the profit loss. You know, like if they make more money on the now firmly controlled prices, they will make up for the customers they lose. I don't really care too much about the numbers game. I care about the reality of the customer base shrinking or moving back and forth, but that requires commitment. And I know it's, for some people that's kind of difficult, but I don't know. I'm perfectly fine not purchasing another Sony console ever again if this is something that go through with it, you know. And Xbox and Nintendo are not off the hook either. The Xbox outage was embarrassing. You know, the point that you could put a disc in your console and it just would not register. They need to do better. They've announced that they're doing better for whatever that's worth. They announced it. Maybe they just want to score an easy win by talking about it. Physical media is in a bad place regardless, and Nintendo obviously has that whole digital key card stuff going on. We're as that one guy who blamed all this on the United States elections, he put it, we're in a precarious position right now. You know, I disagree firmly with how we got here compared to that fucking retarded way to look at it, but we are in a precarious position one way or the other. I can only hope it gets better, but if not, life will find a way with me. And if that means they don't see my money anymore, it is what it is. I'll find a way to game him, you know, until the day I die, regardless if I have to fight a fucking guerrilla war style over it, or if I have to, like, you know, just say like, oh good, they came to their senses and now we can just have this healthy consumer relationship again, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that's anytime soon, but I would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anywho, did we lump the outages in with that update, right?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
It's all lumped together.
Okay, Anthony, about to fucking strap in for another one. What's going on with Square Enix?
So Daniel, I actually sent you a picture about this, and I actually saw you react to it, which was actually interesting. I was very proud of you for reacting in the way that you did.
Wait, is this about the whole art book thing?
Yes.
Right. Okay. This was pretty crazy to me.
Yes,
Because
yes.
not that I didn't believe you in like any other time that you've sounded the alarm or anything like that, because I absolutely did.
Hmm.
It's just it's different when you're seeing like a essentially a cry for help right in front of you.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain what we're talking about first, and then we can get into the whole censorship debacle.
Yes. So, what everyone was abuzz with this week is Roberto Ferrari is a artist at Square Enix. He was the topic of discussion this week because Daniel, he made some comments in an art book, as you said. So I'm just gonna read his comments and what the subjects they're on,
Hmm.
and we'll go from there. So, the art book in question is the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Material Ultimania. Basically, Square Enix, they are pretty consistent. Typically they release a lore book with like a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and then they release an art book that goes into the creation of the designs. They've been doing this pretty consistently for a lot of their projects for a long time. I think I own a few of them. I don't know where I put them, but anyway. So this one was for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and next to a lot of the designs in this art book are comments from the creator. So we have the character artist, level designers, they're saying different things. Now, Roberto used this to essentially vent. You called it a cry for help. A lot of people are calling it venting. So right here, we have a picture of Cloud, just a normal dude, wearing some swim trunks. And right here, he says, the swimsuits worn by Cloud and the other characters were drawn in a way that didn't overly emphasize their figures. This was done in accordance with ethical guidelines and internal feedback. Well, that doesn't really seem to talk too much about the creative process. Let's see what else he had to say. So we move over to a different character, Aerith, one of the two characters. This is, if you talk to any Final Fantasy VII fan, the whole do you like Aerith or do you like Tifa has been like a long-standing fight between the two. So this is, it's one of the two main girls. Let's see what he had to say about this. This swimsuit design was drawn in response to a request to conceal her feminine curves as much as possible. That's all he said. That's all he said about this swimsuit design. I'm like, okay, that's pretty weird. So you go to the next one, Tifa. A lot of people love this woman. One of the more popular designs in the entire franchise. Let's see what he had to say about this. It's a pretty tasteful swimsuit, I'd say. Let's see. He says, I tried a lot of different kinds of designs for Tifa's swimsuit, but getting any of them approved was a real challenge. Since players can view the characters from all sorts of angles in the game, we had to keep certain things in check and not overemphasize her feminine figure. In the end, we settled on this design. Dan, do those sound like an artist reminiscing about the creation process, or what does that sound like to you? I know you already
Sounds
kind of
like
said
a
it.
cry for help. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and then
They couldn't get what they originally designed approved as something to go into the game that they've been working on for however many years, and they just had to water it down to whatever the fuck the suits wanted.
Now, this reminded me because obviously this is a topic I'm passionate about. I immediately went in the back of my head. I remember when Final Fantasy VII was coming up, it was beginning to be new. This was around the time that Square Enix announced that, or I say announced, but it was really just like one of those boilerplate things that they put in the back, and it was announced on Twitter, but it wasn't like they took to the stage to say it. They said they had an ethics department, and there was a whole lot of hubbub around some of the character designs and all this whatnot. And I'm just like, didn't he say a couple things in the previous art book? So I go back and I find one of these images for basically there's a section of the game where the same characters, Cloud, Aerith, and Tifa, like one of the things is you're supposed to dress them up in a way that looks appealing so they can sneak into this mansion and get invited in a certain way, right? And so there are different outfit choices. And one of them for Tifa, he says the following: this was probably the Tifa dress I struggled with the most. My designs kept getting sent back. I think I must have gone through a dozen revisions or more. It feels like a miracle that this dress actually ended up being used in the game. Not quite venti, but you can tell that there's something wrong going on behind the scenes. So this comes to light, and immediately as that happens, Dan, a lot of people are getting into, some people are going, aha. As we all knew, there are external pressures that are pressuring companies and people within the companies and creators to essentially hamper their work at a creative level. Not like put it out and then censor it for different regions, but to change it at its core. There is a third party who is influenced by another third party that essentially influences the creative process. Something I've been screaming about for as long as the topic has been something in my head. But Dan, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people place the blame elsewhere. And where they're placing that blame, Dan, is with CERO. Do you know what CERO is?
Some censorship organization, maybe?
Okay. So if you're not familiar with CERO, much like Dan here isn't, it is the Japanese equivalent of PEGI and ESRB. It is a self-regulated rating system. Despite essentially existing to serve the same purpose, each of these rating boards have their own kind of layouts and foibles and things they get hung up on. ESRB, as we know, is basically a senile old man. It will have completely...
It's literally like one guy, right?
Well, no. What I mean to say is like the company acts, or the ratings board acts like, because basically like you're completely at the whims of who you get, what day it happens to be. It's why the T and M rating are basically interchangeable and don't apply evenly. And of course, as many Western companies and entities do, they also have a lot of that anti-Eastern bias. It's why Dead or Alive, a lot of the games are rated M, but games like Soul Calibur, with those those assets that your mother saw that one time and she was not a big fan
You
of.
remember that?
They skate by with a T rating, but Dead or Alive always tends to get the M rating. There's just some bias in there. PEGI, on the other hand, European ratings board, their biggest enforcement is essentially around gambling, which, while that can be good if we're strictly talking about informing the consumer, it's not good because it ends up, regulating or changing the product. They're very trigger happy when it comes to like shit like gambling. You might remember that Balatro was temporarily delisted in Europe because it looked like gambling, not that it actually includes gambling. So it kind of gives you a baseline. We're not going to talk about every ratings board like the Australian one. That's a nightmare. But CERO's main hang-up, they have two. It's very simple. Violence and panty shots. That's simple enough to understand. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's simple enough to understand, right? Yeah, like those are their two major hang-ups. But beyond their major triggers, CERO is what Western activists wish ESRB was. They are not only the most sensitive of the three boards that I mentioned, but they are actually greatly effective in what gets released in Japan. So CERO rates their games from A to D. Like we have E, E10, we have the kids one which never gets used, we have teen, we have M, we have AO, that kind of stuff.
I remember that.
They have A to D and it ascends as you would. And that should be pretty straightforward. A, B, C, D, kind of lines up with what we have. That wasn't good enough, Dan. In 2006, they decided to add a new Z rating. Ooh, that sounds that's
scary.
Yes. The first game to ever receive a Z rating was one of my favorites of all time, Dead Rising. So, way to go, Dead Rising. Now, here in the US, we kind of grappled with scrutiny and social shenanigans and hysteria around M ratings, right? And the extreme, rarely seen, never seen anymore, nuke you from orbit AO rating, right? The Z rating, it pans out a little different. You could kind of view it as a rating slightly higher than M, not by content, but in how it's handled in the industry. It's basically the M rating if it wasn't fucking around. There are legal ramifications like fines for selling them to youths or being caught selling them to youths. ID is required by law instead of store policy. The games are kept in separate restricted sections or high up where kids can't see them. There is heavy restrictions around advertising compared to what would be allowed in stores like GameStop or magazines like Game Informer. It has led to situations where different games have two versions released. Like, for example, all of the RE Engine Resident Evil games are routinely released with two versions of the game, a regular rated D version and one that's Z rated. And both of them are heavily censored compared to what we end up getting in the West. Games like Dead Space or the Callisto Protocol, they just don't get released in Japan because of how strict the rating boards are. And as this has been going on, there are plenty of examples of developers and studio people calling them out, especially as they've gotten more strict since the Z rating came to be, and every year they seem to get more and more strict. Shinji Mikami, the Resident Evil guy, has said that the rules are made, quote, by people who don't play games and block the enjoyment for people that do. my good friend Hideo Kojima. He has had to fight, despite his industry clout, he has had to fight on multiple games in his franchise Metal Gear. They completely disregard his very blatant anti-war message throughout the entire series and focus purely on things like the violence and the fan service. So even he's had to deal with it. Yeah. The one time that I've ever heard or can recall Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of Smash Brothers and Kirby, the one time that I've ever seen him express a negative emotion, like this one, in this case being annoyed, was because of the Raiders of CERO in the certification process of the Wii U and 3DS Smash game, because they kept demanding upside down views of every female character and every female trophy in the game.
What the fuck?
They kept requesting all these models, and they had to be changed over and over and over and over again in the developer process. And he called the whole process ridiculous and frankly quite juvenile. Like, the only time I've ever heard this guy annoyed is because of these Raiders, and he's just like, it's just a piece of fabric, get the fuck over it. So look, CERO is a problem. I went over all this just to really show that CERO is a big problem. They scrutinize more than the other boards. The results cause more change than the other boards. The rules and regulations on the books that give them so much sway that of what actually gets sold in Japan, and therefore over the entire creative process, was created and lobbied for by CERO themselves or their founders, the CESA, which is the Computer Entertainment Suppliers Association, which is a whole different story. That has to do with more industry-wide stuff. I have no love for CERO. I want them brought to heel the same way I want other forces I've mentioned week, over month, over year. But that's the thing. I want it all handled. Other people, not so much. I've seen multiple people, knowingly or not, deflect to CERO when censorship or content restrictions or developer comments come up. There's like the aspect of there being a broad global societal regulatory presence that affects people based on whatever cultural whims of the people at the top or activists and all that kind of stuff. It either scares people or it's just too large of a concept for people to acknowledge, and you need to acknowledge it, otherwise things never get better. I didn't do this whole history lesson just to entertain you. It's important to know where this stuff comes from and how it's changed and how all these things are different, if only for the fact that you need to understand that there are different entities in play. Ultimately, all the talk about expression and ethics, something that has been bothering me as often as it gets brought up more and more, as it's a popular excuse for Japanese developers as a reason for changes, or even just a little slip when they're acting like everything's all normal and whatnot, but in reality it's very fishy and doesn't look right. The rules around these things have expanded dramatically on a global scale after 2017, after building up through the 2010s, and that's where you should be able to see the divide in splintering, where you get the old Puritan standards and the new Puritan movements, right? CERO is a representative force of traditional Puritan standards. All the ratings boards really are, and CERO is a gold standard for them in how much they actually get done. But you know what these boards aren't, what they don't represent, and what they don't actually cause, They didn't cause things like Sony having a separate rule book for anime style games on the PlayStation. They didn't cause all the different localizers from companies like Bandai Namco, Xseed, Square Enix, Atlas, Sega, and all the industry-wide freelancers that I've talked about. It didn't cause them to come out of the woodwork and openly talk about how they influence developers. CERO is not the reason that multiple games have been localized to an enormous degree in a verifiable way. They didn't alter franchises like Fire Emblem, Ace Attorney, and Paper Mario to the point where all these games have multiple different scripts across the years and years and different releases. They're not the reason that the developers behind Guilty Gear, Dragon Quest, and Yakuza keep referring to this weird Western global presence that is forcing them to take a look at expression and ethics. CERO is not a global entity. They are a regional one that needs to be taken care of, but it's not the cause behind what this guy had to deal with, And I don't know, man. There are so many examples at this point that it really just frustrates me. Like, you have this on the books right here, this artist basically screaming for help in this. You have the example of them actually openly saying that we're going to have an ethics department going forward to worry about things like ethics and expression. We have that interview with the Dragon Quest creator that I talked about not so long ago, where the Dragon Quest creator and this Shonen Jump editor, they went off script for a little bit and they talked about the Puritan influence of Western standards, you know, which I just want to point out, by the way, it's been 2 years since it was taken down because of supposed misleading mistranslation. That interview never came back. They never relocalized it and put it back up with the correct translation. So I don't know what's going on with that. And this is all to say, Dan, it's just, this is another glaring upfront example of a company being meddled with from the inside by outside forces putting pressure on them. The rating board shit, I don't like it. It sucks. It's awful. It needs to be taken care of. They have way too much power. It's to the point where there are laws and fines attached to how they rate video games, and it's suffocating and it's awful and it's getting worse. But it's not the cause for shit like this. It would certainly not help, because at the end of the day, if CERO pushes forward, these global forces push forward, and vice versa. When one makes ground, the next one takes another step forward. It's like two different legs walking forward. They both need to be brought back down. And anyone just saying, oh guys, it's CERO, there's no such thing as a global force putting pressure on them, when you have multiple examples of people talking about global Western overseas interference or audiences or all this kind of stuff. It's just you're basically running cover for them at this point, and I just have to assume you're malicious or you're too dumb for the topic. So that was
yeah, I don't even know how I should have been counting the minutes on that one.
Yeah, it's just
I don't know like what the solution to something like that is, because now you're talking about like regulatory bodies, and then you kind of have to get government involved. And I don't think anyone really gives a shit, to be honest with you.
So what I will say is that the first thing, there's two answers to that question, and it's not a complete answer, but it kind of shows you where we're going with this. Firstly, the first things first is that like fans and people who actually enjoy these things really need to start pushing back. And I don't just mean against companies, because that's easy enough. It's the fact
but you have to be so into the industry to even want to push back against this.
I get that.
In the same vein that you are. And it's just not that common. Yeah.
And basically where I'm going with this is the first step isn't necessarily the companies. It's like we need to figure out a way to deal with the brain dead consumers that just, like I mentioned it before when we were talking about the people who are very into digital to the point where they run cover for Sony when they go all digital, or the people who are so into like, I gotta own the next Grand Theft Auto. I'd pay $100,000 for the new Grand Theft Auto, and you should too, because quite frankly, they deserve it. We need to find a way to work around or diminish their voices, because they are rank and file soldiers essentially for these kind of movements. Like that's the first thing. The other thing is just really like, in Japan right now, they've gone through a new phase of their government. Obviously they had their election, and there is a rising force within the various parties over there that are basically acknowledging influence on their media, from games to anime to manga, and there is a growing call for maintaining what makes that region's games unique and trying to push it away from the influence of others. So we'll see where it goes. It's constantly in flux, but the whole point is, again, like I say with anything, it's not just about how hopeful a situation is. If something is wrong, you stand up and say it's wrong. And eventually enough people do that, these problems go away. But
I mean, yes, but like, how do you even begin to mobilize people in mass to even make a difference?
Well,
I'm not saying you shouldn't try. I'm just like, it's such a boring.
It's hard. It's hard to talk to people about this. I get it.
Yeah, it's
like,
a very boring topic to something that is very entertaining.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I get, like, even you to a certain degree, like, you understand. You don't belittle the things I say to you. Obviously, you understand them.
Of course not.
But it took an extreme example, like an artist basically like using an art book as his therapy unit to complain or cry for help about it, for you to go like, oh, whoa, that's crazy,
that's fair. That's a fair point.
Like, and I'm saying, like, I'm not using you as an example to say like, oh, you fucking dumb, you should care about this. I'm saying it because like there are moments like that kind of like shatter perceptions about this. And there are two other things to consider really, and it's like we talk about with anything, like when you pursue this avenue, what ends up happening is, even if it's just 1 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 people, you do end up losing people in the long run, right? So
Yeah, of course.
that year over year, you lose enough people, and all that's left are the people with no standards that don't really engage with it outside of a singular purchase. At a certain point, they stop caring, they move on, and the terminally online people that I like to bring up every now and again, even they, at a certain point, they check out, because a lot of those people are just there to fight with people like me who give a shit, you know? So if I move on, and real fans move on, and people who advocate for these things move on, and then like the dude bros that don't give a fuck move on, and you're just left with like these terminally online guys that are just like, well, it's been fully corrupted to my means. Like, eventually you do, that's another slow death that will eventually lead to something more. But it's just, where would I really go with this is, I guess at the end of the day, it's like this will be fixed one way or another. It's just a matter of whether we do it in a timely fashion where like everybody just kind of understands it, because there's so many cracks where like you have newer releases that kind of revel in the things that have been slowly phased out. You have different regions held to different standards. Like I mentioned CERO before, even if I do think a lot of this is the global pressure. Some developers in Korea don't really have that. China only has it so far as they want to, you know, oppress their populace. But if they want to compete with other people, they tend to take the gloves off, so to speak, you know? Like they'll advertise their stuff with full features of whatever is being blocked in other countries, which is a design decision. There have been so many instances of like smaller indie projects or AA projects that excel by embracing the things that get censored in the larger projects. And, you know, at the end of the day, it would not surprise me if like 10, 15 years from now, a lot of the projects that we see now that are getting hampered in some way creatively, we're getting like new re-releases, remasters, and ports. Now the uncensored version. Like, I think there will be a period of time in the future, I don't know how far off it is, where some games are repackaged and resold as like the unrated cut or something like that, you know? I do think that like the industry will rebound in that way. My only main concern, and it's something that I told you about, they want to essentially condition creators the same way they have conditioned consumers to just consume whatever. They want to condition creators to make the games that the way that they want them to be made, you know? So
yeah, I just feel like this battle is just gonna it's an eternal struggle.
Yeah, well, the thing about it, Dan, is it kind of is. There will always be forces of evil out there, and I know that sounds dramatic, but there will always be forces of evil out there that want to corrupt and change things the way that they are. But that being said, we also lived through the 2000s where things were just great regardless of that, and there will be a point in time, regardless of what kind of turmoil and in what form that takes, where we will just be in a place of normalcy again, even though there will be people in the background screeching at the top of their lungs that they want things to go back to the way they were in this 2020s period, you know? So yeah. I'm hopeful for change, but it is really telling. And I just got to say, at a certain point, you, the average person out there hearing this or seeing examples like that, it's like you need to stop, like, not even for like an activism level, but you need to stop humoring these miserable people who, when they hear or see something like this, it's just they break down. They can't handle it, you know? Like, I talked about this with Square Enix in the censorship. We talked a little bit about the Halo, you know, and how that new Halo was designed for, you know, newer people who have lesser standards. There are plenty of remakes I've talked about in the past that have, you know, various instances of censorship or removal of elements that people don't particularly, you know, they're icky to defend, you know? Like I've talked about Ready or Not. When Ready or Not got censored, I talked about both Persona remakes, you know, the one that came out that was a lesser game, and the one that's going to come out that will likely also be a lesser game. I talked about Dead Rising. I talked about the Resident Evil remakes. I've talked about all these different remakes. And whenever these things come up, there will be people who are out there that claim to be fans of these things that will look you dead in the eye and tell you that these products are better off without them. Or in the case where they are the quote unquote reasonable sort, they'll be with you, right? You'll be talking about like, oh, you the Halo AR is way too powerful in Campaign Evolved, or you'll say like, oh, the zombies aren't as aggressive in Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, or you'll say the dungeons aren't as hard in the Persona 3 remake, or you'll say the Resident Evil 2 remake cuts a lot of content. But the second you say something like, oh, and by the way, it's really weird that they replaced this face scan of a former employee who's just a regular white guy with a black woman. I think that's a very strange decision that they didn't just change the face for legal reasons. Or if you say, oh, I find it weird that they censored this female character's designs between the original game and the remake. Or if you say, I think it's weird that they removed X, Y, or Z from all these games. They'll look at you and it's basically like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They'll point at you and they'll just screech. All of a sudden, every major complaint you had that you could agree on with somebody, like a major design change that in a re-release or a remake just does not align with the original vision or is lesser in some way, they will disregard all of that. They'll throw it right out the fucking window, because for some reason, if you bring up everything that was done wrong or changed for arbitrary reasons, your opinions are suddenly invalid. I could sit here and spend an entire episode talking about all the artistic, mechanical, or just any random polish change that everyone, save for consumers that just eat up anything, will agree upon as bad, from the most insane to the very smallest, minute polish problem. I could break down everything to the finest detail, make every point that is objective. But the second you point to something that even like brushes up against cultural, that there's some kind of ulterior motive behind, you get called a grifter, you get called a tourist, you get called a culture war obsessed weirdo. And I'm not even talking about the people who directly advocate for this stuff. I'm saying that there are people out there who will just ignore causes and explanations because they have some kind of cognitive dissonance, as if they've been conditioned in such a way that if a change of this variety happens, it's impossible to show it to them or explain it to them with the reasons, because they'll just assume that you are doing it for an ulterior motive. Like, they'll just say you're some kind of, like I said, all those nasty words I said before, you will just hit a point with them, whether they're dumb, smart, well-meaning, malicious, whether you have concrete proof of trends or a hypothesis or a feeling or a before and after with a remake. None of that matters. You will hit a point with them where they lock up and lock down, and they will regurgitate some kind of dismissal that they've been programmed to just, whether they know it or not, to just regurgitate. They'll claim there's some kind of ulterior motive around you bringing it up, say the changes are minuscule or not worth talking about, and those people are the opposite side of the coin of the people who obsess over everything just to be angry. But at least with those people, I can give them like a reason, and they'll say, oh yeah, that sucks too, if I tell them about something like, oh, the AR is too strong, and they'll run with it, But it's just, all this ramble is to say is that there are some fucking miserable people out there that just consume anything, or they'll pretend they're one of the rational ones, and like they'll be like, oh yeah, I was kind of a fan of the series before, and I really don't like what they did with the latest Halo game. And then you'll say like, hey yeah, I don't like that Williams character, and they'll go, oh, you bigot grifter man, I can't believe you don't like women. It's stupid shit like that. And I guess what I'm rambling about here is that the first step is we need to, just as a group of people, we need to learn not to deal with these people, because at the end of the day, they're only doing this because it's the popular thing to do. If everybody just puts their foot down and pretends to fucking care about these things as art instead of easily consumable products, these people will shut the fuck up and get in line so quick. And they'll either do it because they're following the new popular trend, or because they live in fear, and you will be the new force that has all the strength and power and clout, and they'll just have to fucking fall in line with you. So...
Oh, Jesus Christ, that was worse than the first one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's just, a lot of these issues, like when you ask me like, how do you fix this? A lot of these issues wouldn't even be issues in the first place if there weren't weak, low-informed people who are either they don't give a fuck about where these things come from, or they only care so much as to follow the popular opinion on these things. And it's disgusting, because a lot of these people will also claim to care about it more than you do, but the second it touches some icky topic, they just cave, and they're more likely to turn on you than the people making the bad decisions in the first place. And it muddles things so badly. So the second we, as just a society in general, but as an industry, as people within the industry, learn to put our feet down collectively, and go with this changing tide where it's easier to do that more than ever, we will eventually reach a point where, like, instead of catering to like the 0.001% of people who are just happen to be loud and, you know, in popular power right now, we'll just get back to making games again at scale, you know. So we'll see what happens. But
sorry, you like normally I can keep up with you, but today
it was a lot.
You've eroded me. You have. I don't.
It's a lot.
I'm moving us on. I understand where you're coming from, and I even agree with you. I just don't have the faculties at this moment to go tit for tat.
It's perfectly fine. I took that and ran with it, and it's just because I fucking hate these people, and I want our industry and medium to thrive again. And a lot of this can be solved by giving those people the boot or crushing them underneath the boot. I'm getting tired of it.
Okay, so we're not going to have time for any small stuff, so I think it's just best that we end with Gears, because we got the Gears of War multiplayer reveal this past week, and boy oh boy does it look fucking awesome. First thing that I noticed about it was it looked, and I haven't played it yet, but it looks as if it feels like it plays like the original Gears, but in a better way. Like, they did such a good job at making each playable gear like a lot more what's like a verb tense for agility. Agile. They made a really good change in making all the gears look much more agile, while also looking like they move with such purpose and weight behind every step and move and slide and whatever. It looks really, really good. It looks like a true evolution of the Gears of War formula. Everything about the game, honestly, it looks great. I don't have any one thing so far that I could point to and say I don't like this. Everything that I've seen so far for Gears of War E-Day looks like we're going back to classic Gears, but in it with they're moving the series forward in a meaningful way, and you can't say that about a whole lot of different franchises now. So before we get into the nitty gritty, and again, we don't really have a whole lot of time left, what was your overall takeaway when you watched the reveal?
My overall takeaway is that it looks like a really good time. I have a few small gripes where I do agree with you, where it seems like it's another branch off of the original Gears formula. I kind of noticed, like you mentioned, like, you know, there's like an agileness to it, and I agree with you there. But at the same time, I recognize a familiar rigidness, which the Gears 1, that's what I think of with Gears 1. It's one of those games that is rigid, but in a good way.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Like, they kept the same sense of weight.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Is like,
okay,
it is another branch of evolution off of Gears 1, as you're trying to relate to me. There are a few things I'm not necessarily keen on. Like, I saw that, like, you know, when I saw the first trailer of the single player, I'm just like, oh, you know, this looks good. I like the fact that, like, there's crouching. This is a weird nitpick. I'm not keen on higher profile dashing. Maybe you'll play, like, you know how Gears, you have this very low roadie run. In Gears E-Day, it looks like they have a higher profile while dashing, and I'm not sure how I feel about that just yet. But
wait, higher profile while dashing or wall dashing?
While dashing.
So, first of all, the roadie run is not in the game anymore. It's like an actual.
I know. That's basically what I'm talking about, right? The difference between
I think that is a good change. Like, I know the roadie run is like iconic to the Gears franchise and everything. However, and then this is also going to sound kind of nitpicky and a little dumb, but here we go. I would never run in a battlefield like that ever. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And I thought this since the first Gears of War game. Like, I don't know what the logic or the lore purpose behind the roadie run is or was. And it just became such a mainstay and so iconic to the Gears franchise. It just never went away. And, like, I don't hate it or anything. I just think that the new running animation and the way that the Gears move in E-Day look like they make a lot more logical sense and probably feels better to play also, because the roadie run, like, you're basically launching a rocket. Like, you can't really turn that well. You can a little bit better in Gears 5, but traditionally it's always been like essentially a straight line. Like, yeah, you can make micro adjustments here and there, but you can never like turn 90 degrees or anything like that. You can't even turn 90 degrees in E-Day, but it just looks like it's a more natural, fluid transition between a walk and a run in E-Day. I like it a lot, is what I'm trying to say.
I don't mind it as an option, but I do think that's a net negative removing the roadie run. I know you mentioned that there are some realism logistics behind it, but like the trade-off, like it was supposed to be a commitment of a run where, like, you know, you mentioned that you can't really turn too much, but in Gears 5 and also Gears 3, I would say you have a lot more control over the direction that you're really sprinting into. But like the trade-off is that you are a lower profile, and that comes with that came with an interesting dynamic, because when it came to long-range projectiles, you were lower, you had a lower profile, so it was harder to hit under certain, you know, even if you weren't taking direct cover, you could kind of maneuver around cover to be harder to hit. And at the same time, for close quarters combat, it was a huge negative drawback, because a well-placed shotgun shot could kill you, and it was kind of this dynamic within the game flow itself. So to have regular sprinting in it is like, I wouldn't say it's an inherent deal breaker. I would have much preferred there to be like maybe almost like a two-tiered sprint system, kind of like normal sprint and tac sprint in Call of Duty. I do think that this runs counter to a lot of the messaging around like Gears is back, classic Gears is back, because you can't really have a Gears without roadie run. I'm not writing off E-Day. That would be foolish. I'm not writing it off in its entirely, because I do think that the cover system is a huge part of it too. But I do think removing the roadie run for any reason is kind of like a step in the wrong direction.
All right, I mean that's fair. This is going to be one of those things where we just don't agree, but that's fine. So all right, moving past the roadie run, how much of the game have you seen? Let me just start with that.
I've seen a couple of gameplay snippets and the official release trailer.
Okay, so I have never really been that big into Gears versus. I just haven't. I mean, I did in Gears 1 and 3 respectively, but beyond that, Gears versus was never ever my jam, so to speak. I've always been much more into horde mode and campaign, and so I have a lot less to say about Gears E-Day versus. But what I will say is that I like the fact that everyone is essentially starting on a level playing field. They were very explicit in that messaging. Everyone starts on like with the same weapon set, like everyone's got the same loadout, and just whoever's better, that's who wins. I think that's good, but I've never been like a hardcore Gears versus player, so I can't tell you like how true to the Gears of War soul that really is. So I'm gonna move past that. Horde mode and Horde Siege look like a fucking blast. That looks like a true like evolution in the Gears of War, into that one game mode. They have both this time. So they have like standard horde mode, where I think you can do waves 1 through 10. I'm sure they will have a like a much longer form game mode, where I think in Gears 5 you can get to 50 or something like that.
I think so. Something around there. That sounds right.
I don't even know what the limit is in Siege, but like you can extract in Siege. It kind of looks like they took the best parts of like Helldivers and regular Gears Horde and put them together into the Siege mode. Because additionally, it's not just you and your 3 other friends playing. It's your squad and 2 other squads on this new massive map, and you can tackle objectives in whichever order you want. But if every now and again, like you'll get this gigantic boss, like the not the Reaver. What's the spider looking thing? I forgot what that's called. Is it the Reaver? Corpser, right? You like a Corpser could pop out of nowhere, and you have to fight it and kill it. And you know, yeah, you might be able to do it with just your squad, but there is also the possibility now that the other one or both other squads can like stumble upon the fight and help you. Like that just sounds very cool to me. So this all comes together to create like this much larger scale horde environment that feels a lot more alive, I guess. And there's more to do. And the fortifications look really cool now. I mean, I don't really have anything negative to say about it. Again, it just looks like a really fun, solid game mode that is they are in addition to regular horde mode, which is
Yeah.
a great addition.
That's the key thing right there, because a lot of these games try to do like, oh, we're bringing back this old mode, but we're also trying something new with it, and they normally they do it in such a way where the older version is not available. Having both versions there, the experimental mode and the core version, is a great way to embrace this kind of idea of experimenting, because if something goes awry there, you can still just play the traditional mode. I would say overall, to go along with your point, is I don't really have any problems, and actually somewhat excited about most of the new offerings there. Like it looks like a good Gears game.
Yeah, E-Day might actually be my most anticipated game of the year.
I would say so, yeah, unless there's something I'm forgetting, because I'm pretty bad when put on the spot with questions like that, like, oh, what's your most anticipated?
Yeah, me
Gears
too.
E-Day right now.
Yeah, right now it's E-Day. The Dark Ages came out last year, so that doesn't really count. Otherwise, that would have been on there. I could say Modern Warfare 4, but like I know what I'm getting with that game. It's just going to be it's going to be more Modern Warfare. There's no other way to say it. But I'm totally fine with that. So yeah, E-Day looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm actually really looking forward to the campaign, because this is the first time we're going into any point of the timeline that is not like in order, essentially. So that's pretty cool. I'm excited for the campaign. I am the most excited for Horde Siege, though. I feel like we are going to sink a unhealthy amount of hours into that with Harrison and Nick. Yeah,
more than likely.
But there's yeah, I mean, it looks great. I don't see any. I mean, granted, the fact that the budget for this game is out of control, but that's a conversation for a different day. I think it's like was it like 500 million, like something stupid?
I think it's closer to 400. I think it's 400 million, which would align with what we talked about last week.
Like 5 or 6.
Star Citizen hit $1 billion.
Or was it $1 billion? It was $1 billion. Okay,
it's over $1 billion. Yeah. So I mean, overall, but at the end of the day, there's a clear distinction between product that we interact with and logistics side, and discussing that, because like we've talked in the past, there are some people who are too obsessed with the logistical side and how the companies handle these things. So it's just like I'm more concerned with the game itself, because we're like reaching the finish line. There'll be a time to talk about like where the money went after it releases,
Oh yeah. I mean, the game comes out on October 6th. It's really only like 2 months away.
Yeah.
Very, very excited. I already pre-ordered the collector's edition. Can't wait to add that to my shelf.
There you go.
Yeah, so they also said that there's not going to be any battle passes, which I think is a great thing. There's going to be a handful of purchasable skins, but beyond that, I mean, this is just what they've said in their promotional video, so who the fuck knows how much truth there is to it. But everything else that you see in the game is earnable directly through gameplay, which is how it should be, like full stop. Like if you want to make the asking price of like the in-game currency to be exorbitant, that you have to grind like a ton of time into unlocking whatever it is you want to unlock, I'm okay with that. I truly am. But I just want there to be an avenue to get there via solely gameplay. I can't stand it when the coolest skins are skins that you pay real money for, and that's just kind of what the standard is right now. It's always the better decision to me that if you have an equally cool looking skin that you can unlock through a certain challenge, like I will always chase that first. Just to show off skill. Like that's the only real thing that you have in video games, right? To show off how good you are. So that could be a net positive, but like I don't know how long it's going to last, because already the first batch of skins is like a collaboration with Metallica, which kind of screams like chill a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with that. I don't really have much to say on Versus, like I said, but we know next to nothing about campaign mode other than the Game Awards trailer that was shown.
And we saw technically some snippets, almost like in that classic fashion where it's like they're showing a tech demo, and we saw a little bit of the background.
So yeah, that and Horde Siege looks like a ton of fun. I'm really excited to jump into that. But yeah, so that's what's going on with Gears. Let's see. You have anything else, or did you cover that last topic in their previous rant?
That I fed that into the previous rant.
Okay, so we will move on to Slice of Life and then wrap this up. This is probably the longest episode that we've done so far.
Yeah, it's up there.
Okay, you go first.
I'm ill-equipped. I don't have a Slice of Life this week. which I afford
Really?
myself
Wow.
because you had a week where you didn't have one. I've just been like, there was so much in the way of substantial news. Nothing passed my desk that I didn't think was like
All
worth
right.
talking about as a news topic.
Fair enough. Okay, so my little slice of life this week is the fact that Mick Gordon, the composer for Doom 2016
Oh
and Doom
yeah,
Eternal, yeah,
saw
he
this.
is
Yeah.
performing the which soundtrack is it? Fucking go away, Ed. Doom is Mick Gordon to perform iconic soundtrack live with an orchestra in Manchester for the Radar Festival, and that's
Ooh.
happening in 2027. Radar 2027, whenever that is happening. But let's see, Doom isn't recognizable. So it's probably going to be like a selection of tracks from Doom 2016
Hmm.
and Eternal, but I actually listen to titles off of both of those albums like on a regular basis because
Hmm.
they are legitimately phenomenal metal songs.
Yeah.
And the running joke in the community is that Doom and Doom Eternal are just like $60 metal albums that come with a free game because the music is just so fucking good. And the fact that he is performing this live in 2027 when the games are like as old as they are at this point, at
Hmm.
least for 2016 and Eternal, that was
Yeah.
pretty cool. So that
It's
I decided
it's
to pluck that.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice thing because number one, Mick Gordon's a great composer, and number two, it's
Yeah.
like after they burned him in Eternal, he basically like
Yeah.
swore off working with them. So it is nice to see him coming back and doing this event, and it should be really cool because the first thing I thought of were these older events done by Metallica. If you ever heard of their S&M concerts where they
Oh
perform
God.
alongside orchestra.
I
You ever hear
think I've
those?
heard of that, but I've never actually seen it before.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of, and I'm just like, oh, those were pretty good. That's really like I'm not a big metal guy. Like my metal like kind of verges on power rock with what I like. So I'm not really. But those Metallica performances I tend to enjoy when they were shown to me
Yeah.
however many years ago.
I've
Those
actually
are
been
cool.
listening to a lot of metal like very recently, actually.
Yeah,
And Doom has been in that rotation. Like the only thing they
yeah.
fear is you is like I literally run on the treadmill to that song. It is so good.
I
That
didn't know you
freaking
were on
tear
a.
at Doom's Gate.
I
What?
didn't know you were on a kick like that. I'd recommend some of the older Guilty Gear stuff when they actually did metal music and not J-pop and stuff like that.
Yeah. I not only have I been listening to a lot of metal lately, and like Doom is roped into that, but I've been like watching like first time reactions to the Doom soundtracks on YouTube lately, and it's just hysterical to see people's like gut reactions to them never hearing anything like this before, and then they come to find out that it's from a game, and then like the music is as good as it is. It's just
Mm,
very entertaining.
mhm.
But yeah, so that's my little slice of life this month or this week.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's about it.
I think that
You got
sums up
nothing, you
this
said, right?
week. No, I got nothing.
All right. So yeah, on that note, if you're still listening, good job. This was a very long one, and you listened to Anthony rant a lot this week.
I did. I did.
Um,
We didn't even get to everything we were going to rant
I
about.
know,
So
I know. Oh my
powerful
God,
stuff.
we need like a 4 hour buffer. Jesus. Um, so if you've made it this far, thank you. This was episode 117, haha, of the Pregame Network podcast. And we'll be back next week with whatever happens this coming week. So thank you
All
very
right.
much, and we will talk to everyone next week. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.